Chapter 327. The noise continued. Listening to the sound, it seemed that Long Cheng's Ting Shui was using a whip to whip a woman. The sound of the whip breaking through the air and the woman's screams, in such a cold and desolate night, had an indescribable sense of misery. Gong Yimo endured for a long time without stopping. In the end, she angrily threw the bone in her hand away. She wanted to see what was wrong with Long Cheng's Ting Shui. At this time, Si Kong stopped her. "Princess, that's Lu Ye's private matter." What he meant was that they shouldn't interfere. Gong Yimo didn't know that, she just felt annoyed. "Don't go over there. I'll go take a look myself." After saying that, she went to Lu Ye's side without looking back. Because of Long Cheng's Ting Shui's delay, Gong Yimo finished the barbecue and their camp hadn't been set up yet. Before they got close, Long Cheng's Ting Shui's sharp voice came over. During this time, her temperament had changed greatly. In the past, she would at least put on an act in front of others. Now, she seemed to have a fire in her heart and would directly attack if things didn't go her way. In the group, they could often hear her scolding and the maid's screams. However, this was the first time she wanted to kill someone without caring about anything. "Slut. Even you look down on this princess, don't you? Slut. Are you cursing this princess in your heart? Say something." Long Cheng's Ting Shui stood beside the carriage and a maid was lying on the ground. There were many people around them, but no one dared to stop her. She could only watch helplessly as the whip lashed mercilessly at the pitiful maidservant. Every time, she would let out a blood-curdling scream. Princess. She was covered in blood and couldn't speak. She begged with bloody tears, "I didn't. Princess, I didn't." Slap. Long Cheng's Ting Shui whipped her face, and in return, she let out the sharpest scream. Fresh blood flowed down her face. Her face would definitely be disfigured in an instant. "Didn't." Long Cheng's Ting Shui's eyes flashed fiercely. "You still dare to quibble? Go to hell. Slut." Her raised hand was grabbed by Buji. Buji couldn't watch anymore and made such an offensive move. "Princess. You're a princess, not a horse-raising shrew. I hope you have some self-respect." Buji was a warrior and couldn't stand Long Cheng's method of venting anger on innocent people. Her whip was clearly for Gong Yimo to see. Her hand was caught by Boogie, and Long Ching Snow was unable to break free several times. Her sinister eyes stared at Boogie, and that look was even more terrifying than a poisonous snake. "Let go." Boogie refused to let her go. "Princess, you have to tell me what she did to deserve such treatment." Long Cheng's Ting Shui was furious. She kicked the girl next to her. The kick landed right on her soft abdomen, causing her to curl into a ball in pain. Only then did she vent her anger a little. This slut splashed boiling hot tea on this consort's body. She Shui's Ting Shui. The maid on the ground wanted to explain, but she was in so much pain that she couldn't open her mouth. She didn't do it on purpose. The princess said she wanted to drink water, and the water that was just boiling. But when she brought it over, she refused to drink it. She said she wanted to wait for the water to cool down. But the porcelain bowl wasn't insulated. Her hand was scalding hot. In the end, she couldn't hold on any longer and accidentally knocked over the bowl. The water splashed onto Long Cheng's Ting Shui's skirt, but it definitely didn't burn her. Buji naturally knew she was being unreasonable. He said in a low voice, "Even so, she's already been punished. You're not allowed to hit her." Hearing that, Long Cheng's Ting Shui coldly retracted her hand and looked at him coldly. "You'd better not interfere. Otherwise, when we return to Luyi, I'll definitely complain to Imperial Brother. I'll say, you've been insulting me the whole way. You." She's shameless. Buji was so angry that he was trembling. But he really didn't dare to touch her. Long Cheng's Ting Shua smiled proudly. She raised her whip and lashed it down again. The scream sounded again, but it was gradually weakening. There was even a hint of death in the voice. If this continued, she definitely wouldn't be able to survive. The hearts of Lu Ye's people present were filled with a kind of sadness like a fox grieving for a rabbit's death. This servant was also a human. Even if she was going to die, she shouldn't be tormented like this. This was simply not treating her as a human. But they didn't dare to say anything. They only felt more and more disappointed. Enough. When Gong Yimo walked over, she saw such a scene. What were these Lu Ye's people doing? Didn't they see that Long Cheng's Ting Shua was about to beat someone to death? When Gong Yimo came, Long Cheng's Ting Shua subconsciously stopped whipping. At this time, she was holding the whip in her hand. Her cheeks were red. Obviously, she was having a lot of fun. What are you doing here? Her chin was slightly raised, but her whole body was alert. Could it be that Gong Yimo still wanted to interfere with her Lu Ye's matters? She was thinking too highly of herself. Gong Yimo looked at the person on the ground and frowned. Are you all blind? Why aren't you dragging her away? As soon as she spoke, the surrounding Lu Ye's people quickly moved. Seeing that they were so obedient to Gong Yimo, Long Cheng's Ting Shua was angry. She stepped forward and blocked the crowd. I'll see who dares. She coldly stared at Gong Yimo, Gugwa's eldest princess. This is Yuhing, and these are Lu Ye's people. What qualifications do you, a princess of Daiyu state, have to order them? Gong Yimo felt that this person was unreasonable. If you do this, aren't you afraid that your imperial brother will be in a difficult position and lose the hearts of the people? Ha ha ha. Long Cheng's Ting Shua laughed as if she heard a joke. Hearts of the people. They dare. Her gaze swept around. Everyone turned their faces away, not daring to speak. Only then did she sneer with pride. She's just a lowly servant. It's her honor that I beat her. As she spoke, she fiercely stomped on the servant girl's finger on the ground and crushed it with force. The girl who was originally powerless to scream screamed again. In the midst of the scream, Long Cheng's Ting Shua was like an evil spirit as she slowly and coldly said. Come, you tell this meddlesome person, do you deserve to die? Is it your honor that I punish you? Speak. Yes, yes, it's this servant's honor, woo-woo. I beg the princess to, let me go. Her voice was broken and many people closed their eyes, unable to bear to watch. In their hearts, they hated Long Cheng's Ting Shua to the extreme. Do you see? Long Cheng's Ting Shua turned her face to the side and gloomily looked at Gong Yimo. In the light of the fire, her face flickered, but her foot didn't relax at all. She begged this princess to do this, aw. The servant girl raised her bloodied face and screamed miserably. It turned out that Long Cheng's Ting Shua increased the strength of her foot again. Her finger was almost crushed. Gong Yimo couldn't bear it anymore. She took a step forward and directly grabbed Long Cheng's Ting Shua's collar and lifted her up. In this way, that servant girl was finally rescued. She was pulled away by kind-hearted servants to prevent her from suffering again. Gong Yimo. Are you crazy? This is our Lu Ye's private matter. I'm happy to let a few people die, it's none of your business. Chapter 328. With a muffled bang, Gong Yimo grabbed Long Ching Ting Shua and pressed her against the carriage with anger. I'm going to interfere. Not only will I interfere, I'm also going to teach you a lesson. You really don't know what's good for you. As she approached, her aura seemed to materialize. The little princess was scared and looked at Buji for help. Are you dead? Imperial brother is really blind. As Lu Ye's person, you actually don't help me when I'm being humiliated. Buji didn't want to help her, but she was right. This was Lu Ye's matter and she was Lu Ye's princess. He couldn't ignore it. So he endured his reluctance and slowly walked to Gong Yimo and said to Gong Yimo, "Please let her go, princess of Gu country." Buji glanced at the little princess's ferocious face and gritted his teeth. This is Lu Ye's matter after all. If he was really taught a lesson by an outsider, where would Lu Ye put his face? Hearing this, Long Ching Ting Shui proudly raised her chin at Gong Yimo. She gasped for breath and said sarcastically, "Did you hear that? This is my, Lu Ye's, matter. You better let me go. I'll give that slut an interesting death." She stared at Gong Yimo and every word was like a curse from the abyss of hell. "I'm going to cut off that slut's fingers one by one. I won't let her die. I'm going to tie her to the back of the carriage. If she dies before we reach Lu Yi, I'll demote her brother and sister to slaves. If she doesn't die, I'll make her the lowest military prostitute. I want her to beg for death. I want her to beg for death." Although she was talking about the pitiful maid, anyone with a discerning eye knew that this was Long Ching Ting Shui's imagination and curse towards Gong Yimo. However, she couldn't touch Gong Yimo now, so she could only rely on tormenting others to ease her hatred. She wanted to torture people in front of Gong Yimo. She also wanted to kill people. What could Gong Yimo do? "Let me go if you know what's good for you. Lu Ye's matters are none of your business." But since Gong Yimo made a move, how could she let it go? At this time, she was only an arm's length away from Long Ching Ting Shui. She bent her elbow and took a step forward, sneering, "None of my business. Ha, I'll let you see if I can interfere or not." As she spoke, she actually reached out and snatched the whip from the other party's hand. Then, she pushed Long Ching Ting Shui to the ground and fiercely swung the whip. The whip made a crisp paw sound in the air. Long Ching Ting Shui's Gong Yimo. "How dare you?" As she spoke, her body kept shrinking back. Then, she said to Boogie, who was already stunned, "Are you stupid? Why don't you just stop?" To Ching Ting Shui, S to T to Shui, to Shui to Ching Ting Shui. Gong Emo raised her whip and coldly spoke to them as the stone chips flew. "Don't move. In case I accidentally lose control of my strength and end up killing her. That wouldn't be good." Her words put the people around her in a difficult position. Buji looked at the little princess who was shivering on the ground and said, "Princess Gugwa, this is not appropriate. You don't have the right to teach Lu Ye's princess a lesson." "I don't have the right." Gong Yimo suddenly made a move and slapped Long Ching Ting Shui's leg. She really slapped her. "Ah!" Long Ching Ting Shui hugged her leg with trembling hands and looked at Gong Yimo with resentment. "I want you to die. I want you to die. As you can see, this has nothing to do with the country. I'm just taking revenge. I saved her out of kindness, but she betrayed me and almost killed me. Why can't I teach her a lesson?" Gong Yimo's cold aura was threatening. "She's a princess, and I'm a princess too. There's no reason why I can't repay her for scheming against me. Since she has the intention to harm others, it's not too much for me to slap her, right?" With a wave of her hand, the whip was raised high and fell on Long Ching Ting Shui's shoulder again. "Paw!" This caused everyone present to tremble. "Ah!" Long Ching Ting Shui couldn't help but cry. Her shoulder was burning. She didn't dare to be ruthless and begged Buji. "Uncle Buji, save me. She wants to kill me." Buji was brought back to reality by her cry. In the end, he couldn't watch his princess being beaten. He said to Gong Yimo firmly, "Princess, please stop. Otherwise, even if I have to fight to the death, I'll still do it." However, not many people responded to him. Instead, it was Gong Yimo who laughed. She waved her hand and 49 Imperial guards rushed over. They formed a circle and separated Lu Ye's people. Although they were outnumbered, their aura was definitely superior. I'm going to teach her a lesson today. You can save her, but I'll say this first. If you don't move, I'll slap her 20 times. If you move one person, I'll slap one more time. You can see if I'm joking. With that, she raised her hand again. The third time. Bang! This time, Long Cheng's Ting Shui shrieked. She glared at Gong Yimo and the others with hatred. However, she didn't have the strength to call for help. She didn't feel it when she was slapped, but when she was slapped, it was really painful, princess. Buji was a little anxious. However, he saw that Gong Yimo didn't seem to be faking it. Moreover, Gong Yimo, the princess of Daiyu State, was famous for keeping her word. If she said 20 times, it was 20. If he and the others really moved, the little princess would suffer even more. 4. Paw. Ah. It hurts. Help, help. Long Cheng Ting Shui screamed. She was delicate and precious. When had she ever suffered like this? Buji clenched his hands into fists. He looked at Gong Yimo and said, "Why do you have to do this? Princess of Gu State, what good will this do for you when you go to Luyi?" "Of course." Gong Yimo smiled and nodded. "I feel good after I've vented my anger." There was nothing Boogie could do about it, because he looked around and found that even his own people had a gloating expression on their faces. Long Cheng's Ting Shui being beaten up was simply the wish of the people. Even if his people made a move, they would not be a match for her. Now, he could only hope that Gong Yimo would be gentler and let these 20 lashes pass quickly. Seeing that Buji wasn't speaking, Long Cheng Ting Shui panicked. She crawled a few steps in Buji's direction in fear. "Uncle Buji! Uncle Buji, help!" However, Gong Yimo's whip followed her like a shadow. When the whip landed on her leg, she was in so much pain that she couldn't even crawl. In the end, Buji couldn't bear it and turned his head away. Long Cheng Ting Shui was stunned. Then, she crawled toward the others. "Save me! All of you, save me! When I return to the country, I'll definitely reward you handsomely." However, she crawled on the ground and begged in a circle. The Imperial Guards blocked the bodies of Lu Yi and the others, but they didn't block their sight. In their eyes, Long Cheng Ting Shui read a kind of emotion called indifference. What was going on? She was clearly Lu Ye's most favored little princess. Gong Yimo took a few steps forward and smiled devilishly. The whip in her hand was like a talisman that hastened her death. "Are you ready?" The dim light in her eyes flickered. There are still 15 lashes left. Chapter 329. Gong Yimo. You lunatic. You'll die a horrible death. She turned her head and said fiercely to Gong Yimo. Slap. Gong Yimo rewarded her with the 6th whip, and she screamed in pain. Bitch, bitch. You're a vicious woman. How dare you pretend to be so kind in front of Gong Dai? Slap. Gong Yimo saw that her face was scrunched up in pain, and cold sweat and tears flowed down her face. She finally vented her anger. She had wanted to teach her a lesson for a long time, but she held it in for the sake of the big picture. But now, she didn't want to hold it in anymore. So what if I'm vicious? You're kind. Then I'd like to see if anyone will come to save you. Gong Yimo didn't show any mercy. Why did it sound so good when she said something like this? Long Cheng Ting Shui was almost crying after being whipped a few times. She never thought that Gong Yimo was such a crazy person. she didn't consider the consequences of her actions. But what she didn't know was that it wasn't that she didn't consider the consequences, but that she had already thought of countermeasures. Just like these few lashes, she used her inner strength. It hurt a lot, but there were no external injuries at all. She was not afraid of anything, she just wanted to hit her. After a few lashes, Enchanting wanted to faint, but because it was too painful, she stayed awake and endured the torture with a clear mind. Buji. Twaluan. After a few more lashes, Enchanting felt that she couldn't take it anymore. She was going to die. So she called out the names of Lu Yi and the others again. You want to watch her kill me, right? Gong Yimo said at the right time, there are only 5 lashes left. Are you sure you want to interfere? Ambassador Lu Yi couldn't bear to see her like this, but he was suppressed by her voice in time and couldn't say a word. Buji raised his hand and put it down. Finally, he sighed and said, Princess Gugwa, why do you have to do this? What good would it do to have a bad relationship with Enchanting? Gong Yimo indifferently pointed her whip at the shivering Enchanting on the ground and said, when I saved her, she wanted to kill me. Why should I show mercy to a person who wants to kill me? With that, he swung his hand and slapped Enchanting's back, making her whole body lie on the ground, unable to move. Humiliation. Endless humiliation. Dust flew into the air, covering her face that was covered in cold sweat and tears. At this moment, she was covered in dust and dirt, lying on the ground like a dog struggling at death's door. And these people that her royal brother had sent to protect her, were coldly watching from the sidelines. She hated them so much. She wouldn't let any of them off. Everyone who had seen her miserable state had to die. Gong Yimo whipped her back again, causing her to twitch all over. But this time, she clenched her teeth and did not scream. This surprised Gong Yimo. She slowly got up. That pair of venomous eyes seemed to be dipped in poison, looking at her as if she was going to pounce and bite her at any time. Gong Yimo, slut. I will let you die, let you die. Gong Yimo laughed without a care. Didn't you feel very good when you whipped her just now? Didn't you just say that it was her honor to be whipped by you? Then if I whip you, do you also feel honored? Enchanting stared straight at her, the veins on her forehead popping out. I want to sell you to the lowest grade brothel. For 1 money, you can do it once. Is that so? Gong Yimo calmly shrugged her shoulders, but she used her strength and the whip came down, causing Enchanting to cry out and lie on the ground. In any case, you are a princess. I don't know what your mother who was born as a courtesan taught you. Go back and tell your mother that you have become a princess. Don't keep thinking about the unbearable past. You. Enchanting was lying on the ground, almost vomiting blood. At this time, her hair was scattered and it was as scary as it could be. And what Gong Yimo said was the thing that she hated the most in her heart. That is, her mother was born as a courtesan. This was her disgrace. I will chop you into 8 pieces. 5 horses. Her face was covered in tears and dust, only her pair of bloodshot eyes looked like they could eat people. And all of you. Her eyes swept around, seemingly looking at the imperial guards, but Gong Yimo knew that she was talking to Lu Yi and the rest. All of you must die. All of you must die. Gong Yimo's whip came down and broke her vicious curse. She lay on the ground again. There was no part of her body that did not hurt. At this time, she lay on the ground and did not have the strength to curse anymore. She could only use her pair of eyes to glare at people. With deep malice. She was obviously so miserable, but there was no one around her who sympathized with her. Their conscience must have been eaten by dogs. At this time, they actually looked on coldly and watched her being humiliated. Moreover, it was by Gong Yimo who humiliated her. They saw her, a princess, being beaten like a beast, unable to get up from the ground. They deserved to die. They deserved to die without a complete corpse. And Gong Yimo. She did not dare to raise her head to glare at Gong Yimo, but her hatred for her had reached the peak. She wanted to strip Gong Yimo of her clothes and hang her on the city gate for everyone to see. She wanted to let the horse take her body, so that she could no longer pretend to be pure in front of Gong Dai. She wanted her to die. Paw. This last whip was so painful that Long Ching Ting Shue screamed weakly and her whole body went limp. Gong Yimo threw the whip aside and walked in front of her. Long Ching Ting Shue raised her head and saw a pair of extremely cold eyes. I hope that from now on, until we reach Luyi, you will know your place. Gong Yimo said her request with a smile, but the darkness in the depths of her eyes was frightening. Don't force me to kill you. Enough. Buji rushed out of the way of the imperial guards and protected Long Ching Ting Shue under his body. You said you wanted to take revenge, so you have beaten her. Don't provoke her any more. Gong Yimo smiled. Snakes don't have a heart, only their nature. Protect her. I think that when we reach Luyi, the first person she will bite to death will be you. However, this matter did not concern her, so she casually reminded him and left. At this time, Long Ching Ting Shue was being supported by Buji. Her whole body was in pain, but when she saw that Buji was shocked by Gong Yimo's words and fell into deep thought, she endured the pain and hatred. She grabbed Buji's arm and said pitifully, Uncle Buji. I know I was wrong, I know I was wrong. Don't believe her, don't abandon me. Seeing her like this, Buji hurriedly threw his previous thoughts aside, but because he was afraid that Long Ching Ting Shue would fall into Gong Yimo's hands again, he could not help but say earnestly, Princess, you have to lower your head when you are under someone else's roof. You should not provoke her in the future. Everything will be fine when we return to Luyi. Isn't it because you people are useless? Chapter 330. Long Ching Ting Shue thought with hatred. If it weren't for the fact that they were useless, 1,000 people couldn't beat 50 people. Would she have suffered such humiliation? If it weren't for the fact that they were useless and couldn't help her take revenge, would she have thought of escaping by herself? Would she have been caught by Chakran and humiliated by him? If it weren't for the fact that they were useless, she would have already cut Gong Yimo into 1,000 pieces. Instead of being whipped and tortured by her. But this useless man actually wanted her to endure and compromise. She almost broke her teeth from clenching them. Yes. Uncle Boogie. I will never provoke her again, she cried, but she swore in her heart. These people who had seen her humiliated, who had seen her worst side, she would not let any of them go. She would kill them all. Boogie sighed, Raki is a good girl. She is recuperating at Uncle's place. These days, let Kebu take care of you. You. Take good care of your injuries. Long Ching Ting Shue nodded, lowered her eyes, and hid the resentment in her heart. Just you wait, all of this humiliation. She would take them all back one by one. On the road again, Long Ching Ting Shue was a lot more well-behaved. She was no longer like before, making all kinds of unreasonable trouble. Now, she was extremely obedient, causing Boogie to feel very guilty. He comforted and took care of her all the way, but did not let Gong Yimo worry anymore. Princess, tomorrow we will arrive at Luye's border city, Raging Fire City. As Si Kong said this, he looked at Gong Yimo with some worry, because when they arrived at Luyi, there was still a tough battle to fight. Moreover, there was always a hidden danger by his side. Several times, he found that Long Ching Ting Shue looked at the princess with a terrifying gaze. He was really afraid that she would do something again. However, after saying a few times, Gong Yimo did not respond. Si Kong found that the princess was in a daze again. For some reason, ever since the last time. After Gong Dai kissed her in public, Gong Yimo could not control herself. Occasionally, when she thought of him, she would be lost in thought. It was dark, what was he doing? But there was definitely no answer to this question. It was better to go to sleep. The next few days were very peaceful. Gong Yimo originally thought that once they arrived at Luyi, Long Cheng's Ting Shui would cause trouble. Who knew that she was very well behaved along the way? Every time Gong Yimo went to meet the castellan to clear the level, she did not make a fuss. This made Gong Yimo feel that something was wrong. When Longqing Wuji received the letter from Dai Yu State, he had already gotten over his anger. However, he was still rational because Dai Yu State did not exaggerate the truth. The contents of the letter were similar to what Boogie had reported. But when he thought about how his married sister had been rejected like this, it was a great humiliation. Therefore, the closer Long Qing and Ting Shui got to Lu Yihuadu, the more restless he felt. Unfortunately, his imperial concubine mother was still so worrisome. Longqing Wuji and Long Cheng's Ting Shui were both born of the current imperial concubine, Hua Shi. The only son left behind by the previous imperial concubine had already been killed by Longqing Wuji. Now, there were 4 of them in the family and there were no outsiders. However, the only people who had a headache were the old King Lu Yi and his imperial concubine, Hua Shi. They were too biased towards their youngest daughter, Long Cheng's Ting Shui. After hearing about this matter, they insisted that Dai Yu State was in the wrong. It was the Dai Yu State's princess who provoked Long Cheng's Ting Shui first. Otherwise, why did Long Cheng's Ting Shui, who was such a good girl, harm her instead of others? Longqing Wuji was so angry that his head hurt from the 2 elders' sophistry that he simply ignored them. In any case, with him watching, he was not afraid that they would cause any trouble. Finally, Long Cheng's Ting Shui returned. Old Lu Yi, Wang Duode, and his wife, Hua Shi, had been waiting at the city gate for a long time. Longqing Wuji felt embarrassed, but now was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. Therefore, he also waited at the gate and watched coldly as the troops got closer and closer. Because it was a family scandal, Longqing Wuji had long driven the commoners away. He did not bring any ministers, so there were only soldiers at the huge city gate. Most of these soldiers were old Lu Yi, Wang Duoda's men. He even said righteously that this was to let the people of Dai Yu State see Lu Ye's heroic bearing. Soon, the troops entered the city. As soon as Gong Yimo entered the city, she felt that the atmosphere in the city was a little too oppressive. Among the large group of soldiers, the expressions of the 3 leaders were not good. Gong Yimo smiled. At this time, Buji and the others stepped forward in shame and knelt in front of Longqing Wuji. We have failed the king's great trust, please punish us. Naturally, King Lu Yi would not punish him. This matter had nothing to do with him. On the other side, Long Cheng's Ting Shui happily got off the carriage. Looking at her parents, her eyes were filled with tears. Father, mother. When she saw her long-awaited family, she quickly wanted to go over. However, she was stopped by Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Long Cheng's Ting Shui glared angrily at her. Gong Yimo, this is Lu Yi. If you know what's good for you, hurry and let go of this consort. Duoda and his wife, Hua Shi, also woke up from their joy of seeing their daughter. They looked at Gong Yimo darkly. Gong Yimo smiled. It's nothing. I just wanted to go with you and pay a visit to these people. As she spoke, she pulled Long Cheng's Ting Shui towards the supreme ruler of Lu Yi. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, none of Lu Ye's ministers were present. Thus, Gong Yimo saved herself the trouble and directly dragged Long Cheng's Ting Shui towards Longqing Wuji. How dare you! Duo De suddenly roared angrily. Soon, a line of people blocked her path. Let go of Ting Shui. She is my princess of Luyi, not your servant. Gong Yimo grabbed the panic-stricken Long Cheng's Ting Shui and laughed like a rascal. It's impossible for me to let her go. There are so many of you eyeing her covetously. If I let her go, do you think I can still stand here and talk? Duo De didn't expect Gong Yimo to be so cunning. His original plan was to seize Gong Yimo while she was unprepared. However, she kept dragging Ting Shui, making it difficult for him to make a move. Long Cheng's Ting Shui saw that Gong Yimo was so difficult to deal with. She couldn't help but look pitifully at Longqing Wuji. Imperial brother, her eyes were filled with tears. This imperial brother really made Longqing Wuji's heart soften. He glared at Long Cheng's Ting Shui in disappointment, then said to Gong Yimo with an unhappy expression, Princess Gugua, please let my little sister go. If there's something, let's sit down and discuss it properly. He looked at Gong Yimo threateningly. This was his territory. She'd better not refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. There's no need to sit down. Let's stand here and discuss the case first. Then, she said to Sikong, bring him here. Sikong obeyed and brought Chukran, who had been locked up for a long time. At this moment, he looked dispirited, as if he had aged 10 years. Longqing Wuji had also received a message from Buji regarding this matter, so his face immediately darkened. Princess, what is the meaning of this? Gong Yimo said calmly, nothing. If you don't want your sister's reputation to be ruined, why don't you dismiss all the soldiers? She was so domineering even in someone else's territory. Her lawless appearance made it hard for people to hate her. Chapter 331. Impudent. The old consort was furious and slapped the carriage, let go of Ting Shui. Then, she glared at her son, Wuji. Are you going to watch her bully your sister like this? Longqing Ting Shui was completely dumbfounded. She didn't expect Gong Yimo to threaten her to force her father and mother to retreat. How could she let her succeed? She still wanted to see Gong Yimo get captured and humiliated. Longqing Wuji frowned. He looked at Gong Yimo and then at his useless uncle. He didn't know who ordered him to do such a thing after the Dark Empress, but now he had to clean up the mess. Also, they still had old scores to settle with Gong Yimo. Are you sure you want to do this? Isn't it better to return to the palace with Ben Wang? Some things have to be explained now. Gong Yimo remained unmoved and sneered at the surrounding soldiers who were glaring at her. I just entered the city and you already have an army to suppress me. I really wonder if there will be an even bigger surprise waiting for me in the palace. With that, she pulled Long Cheng's Ting Shui, whose face had turned pale, and impatiently said, This is your last chance. Send these people away. Otherwise, I don't mind telling them about him right now, and let the whole Luyi know what your Wangye has done. At this time, Longqing Ting Shui was a little scared and begged her parents, Father, Mother, save me. The old Luyi king and consort were furious when they heard this. Gong Yimo dared to threaten them with Ting Shui's reputation. But Longqing Wuji was here, they couldn't ignore his words. The white-haired Dod said, Son. This woman is so arrogant, you must punish her severely. Seeing that they still didn't give up on retreating, Gong Yimo wasn't someone to be trifled with. She sneered and pointed at Chakran. Since that's the case, let's all listen together. You're Prince of Luyi, no. Don't say it. Longqing Ting Shui stared and interrupted her in panic. At this time, she didn't want to catch Gong Yimo. Anyway, there was still a long way to go. For the sake of her reputation, she couldn't let Gong Yimo be exposed now. So she quickly said to everyone with a cold face, "Back off. All of you, back down." Hearing Longqing Tingshue's words, Longqing Wuji waved his hand. "All of you, stand down." Seeing that everyone had retreated and there were less than 100 people left, Longqing and Tingshue were relieved. Gong Yimo was also satisfied and told Sikong to keep an eye on Chakran. He was still useful. Then, let's discuss the first matter. Gong Yimo was standing on the ground while Longqing Wuji and the others were sitting on the high palanquin. She was holding Longqing Tingshue's hand, giving off an imposing aura. The cooperation between the two countries is a good thing, and the marriage alliance is also the icing on the cake. But what does Lu Yi mean? Your princess came to my country, and the first thing she did wasn't to choose a husband, but to frame me during my country's Holy Land ceremony. Seeing that no one spoke, Gong Yimo continued, Lu Yi was the one who initiated the cooperation, and so was the marriage alliance. But she came and did such a thing. I can't help but suspect that this is Lu Ye's scheme. So, my Daiyu state doesn't want this princess anymore, and Lu Yi must give me an explanation. This is preposterous. Dodd couldn't stand his daughter being humiliated like this. His beard curled up. Lu Yi, haven't asked your Daiyu state for an explanation. You humiliated my, Lu Ye's, most precious princess, and you still dare to ask us for an explanation. Unfortunately. Gong Yimo revealed her white teeth. I am also Daiyu state's most precious princess. Why can't I have her? She didn't blush at all when she said this. Even Longqing Wuji couldn't help but smile when he heard this. How shameless. The old princess consort concluded angrily. Longqing Wuji thought for a moment, then his face turned serious and he said coldly, asking for an explanation is too overbearing. After all, didn't you send Tingshue back to her country? Her reputation is ruined. Isn't this compensation enough? Gong Yimo smiled, that's that. She deserved to be sent back to her country, but my reputation was ruined for no reason. Shouldn't I ask for an explanation? Longqing Wuji smiled when he heard this. He calmly walked down from the high-up sedan, then approached Gong Yimo step by step. Today, he was wearing a very domineering yellow robe with a fur coat draped over his shoulders. His deep and exquisite face was even more enchanting. When he looked at someone with his blue eyes that were almost purple, it gave off a feeling of special focus. You treated this prince like that in Daiyu state, this prince, didn't I ask you for an explanation? Longqing Wuji lowered his voice. His words were only heard by Gong Yimo and Longqing Tingshue. Ignoring Longqing Tingshue's astonished gaze, Gong Yimo said very calmly. You can ask for it in the future, but we're talking about Longqing Tingshue now. When she said this, a cold light flashed in her eyes. She framed me, and then she almost killed me on the road. I don't know how King Lu Yi wants to resolve this matter. King Lu Yi glanced at his sister and frowned. What compensation do you want? Gong Yimo said, just mention it. King Lu Yi smiled. This prince is very sincere about cooperating with Daiyu state. I don't think you'll go too far. Gong Yimo looked up at him. When she was scheming, her eyes were very bright, and Longqing Wuji was stunned. Previously, you said that you wanted to open up a road with Yuhing. Coincidentally, my Daiyu state also wants to interfere. This matter made Longqing Wuji frown deeply. Daiyu state had already taken the initiative in the matter of the bank, and the water route was also well connected. Now, if they wanted to interfere with the land route, their ambition was too big. Gong Yimo also knew that Longqing Wuji was vigilant, so she said unhurriedly, don't refuse first. Why don't you listen to my plan? I've always been a person who pays attention to a win-win situation, and I've never let anyone suffer a loss. Her smile revealed her sharp canine teeth. The sky was obviously gloomy, but her beauty seemed to be impactful. No, her entire being was impactful. She dared to hold his little sister hostage at the entrance of his country's capital and speak with him with such fervor and assurance. Longqing Wuji's Adam's apple bobbed. Speak. Gong Yimo smiled. Do you know the reason why I didn't choose to go directly north when I was in Dayu State, and then go west to get to Luyi? Instead, I went west first, then north, and purposely went through Yuheng to get to Luyi. Longqing Wuji shook his head. I don't know. Gong Yimo smiled. I'm personally testing whether it's feasible to open up a road from Dayu State to Yuheng and Luyi by land. Her words shocked Longqing Wuji, and she continued, on my way here, I've taken note of many places that can be used as horse ranches and relay stations. If I change the suitable relay stations and open spaces on my way here into transfer stations that combine horse ranches and relay stations, it won't take much. A dozen horse ranches can link up the three countries. Aren't you curious about this business? Chapter 332. Gong Yimo saw that Longqing Wuji was deep in thought. She continued, perhaps you don't understand. When I left, I promised to give you a good idea to complete the transportation route between Luyi and Yuheng. But now, I want to interfere. My idea will only be beneficial to you, Luyi. For example. Longqing Wuji stared at her and asked. For example, if we set up 18 medium-sized horse farms on the road I came from, the merchants from Dayu State would not need to hire guards. As long as they were entrusted to the horse farms of the three countries and paid a transportation fee, they would be able to transport the goods along with the people. The horse farms would not only allow the horses to be replaced, they would also be given time to rest. They would also be provided with lodging and food, so they would not have to sleep in the wilderness. On normal days, the horse farms could also be used to train riding and produce horses. There are countless benefits. Gong Yimo carefully observed Longqing Wuji's expression. Although he was expressionless, he was definitely tempted. She couldn't help but use a bewitching tone to continue. From Dayu State to Luyi, or from Luyi to Dayu State, the number of horses would be maintained at a balanced point. When the time comes, the national defense between the countries could also set up a tax point. I believe that in the future, it would be a considerable amount of income. Of course, there were many other benefits she did not mention. After all, if one wanted to know those, they would have to pay a price. But for now, it was enough that they could reach an agreement. This was also her biggest goal in coming to Luyi. Finding trouble with Longqing Tingshui was just a side trip. Longqing Wuji heard and did not directly refuse. Instead, he looked at Gong Yimo with a pair of bright eyes. He sighed in his heart. She was really a treasure. This matter is of great importance. Why don't you enter the palace for a chat? When Longqing Tingshui saw that the two of them were chatting happily, she was furious. Imperial brother, you, Longqing Wuji glanced at Longqing Tingshui. Gong Yimo also pushed Longqing Tingshui to the front. This matter can also be discussed here, and her matter can also be resolved together. What is it? Forgive Longqing Wuji for being so engrossed in his thoughts right now that he had completely forgotten about his sister. Gong Yimo smiled faintly. She offended me. You haven't compensated me yet. Longqing Wuji suddenly felt that something was wrong. Gong Yimo smiled. The idea I told you just now was based on the mutual benefit of the three countries. But you, Luyi, still owe me an explanation. So, shouldn't you give me some benefits? She finally showed her claws and fangs at this time. Longqing Wuji immediately turned serious. If Gong Yimo demanded an exorbitant price, he would rather give up on this attractive deal than give the Dayu State the chance to exploit him. Gong Yimo felt Longqing Wuji's body suddenly tense up, and could not help but soften her tone. Why are you so nervous? It's not that hard for you to do it. If he believed her, then he should be prepared to be eaten clean. This strange thought flashed through Longqing Wuji's mind. He asked cautiously, "What do you want?" Thinking of something, he smiled ambiguously. "How do you want this prince to compensate you?" Gong Yimo glanced at Longqing Tingshui, as if she was estimating her value. "It's actually very simple." Gong Yimo thought for a moment before saying, "I'll take care of all the horse farms and relay stations on this road." Longqing Wuji was shocked. She was blatantly planting a spy. One had to know that there were occasionally foreigners who settled down between countries. But once they settled down, they had to change their household registration. And Gong Yimo actually meant that the people in the relay stations still belonged to Daiyu State. How was that different from being a spy? Gong Yimo saw his stern expression and could not help but say it again. "Don't be so nervous," she sighed and frowned slightly. "Can't you open your mind a little? Why don't you think about it? Once the 4 countries are connected, those horse merchants will discover the business opportunity of transferring goods from the south to the north. If they want to expand, how could they not set up a fixed store? If Lu Yi came to Daiyu State to set up a store to purchase silk, would our Daiyu State force him to change his household registration? That's true, but if there are too many people like this, wouldn't there be the danger of a large number of assassins sneaking in?" Longqing Wuji hit the nail on the head. Gong Yimo said, "In the beginning, there will definitely be mutual supervision. Moreover, not everyone has the qualifications to set up a store in another country. The size of the store, the amount of money coming in and out, all of these need to be strictly controlled." Gong Yimo looked at him seriously. Once the 4 countries are connected, this is an inevitable trend. The various legal systems will definitely follow. And I'm only taking the first step. Don't tell me you want to cut off this possibility. Unless you don't want to establish diplomatic relations. Allow this prince to think about this carefully. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said in a low voice. "Don't think about it. At most, you can just send people to keep an eye on it. Moreover, although these relay stations belong to me, other than the main person in charge, the workers will still be locals. What problems will there be? This is my only request. Won't you consider it?" Gong Yimo struck while the iron was hot. She lowered her voice and discussed with him, "As long as you agree, I promise that I won't say a word about your younger sister being violated by her uncle. Moreover, I'll even hand Chakran over to you. After all, this is your family's matter." Her words were full of meaning. Longqing Wuji thought about it carefully. What she said was true. Once the trade was connected, as time passed, there would definitely be foreign merchants stationed there. Gong Yimo could be the first. Anyway, he would keep an eye on it and see if it was feasible. Moreover, would he be afraid that he couldn't deal with a few Daiyu State people in his territory? Moreover, Chakran had to come back. He represented that someone was eyeing his position. The most important thing now was to find out the mastermind behind the scenes. Therefore, he nodded in the end. Gong Yimo immediately beamed with joy. "Then we can talk about other things in detail. This matter is settled just like that." Longqing Wuji looked at her helplessly. She actually discussed such an important matter with him at this kind of place, at the city gate. This was not a small matter. Once it was done, this ancient road would continue to be passed down and its name would be passed down through the ages. However, when he thought about it, out of the 18 relay stations, their Lu Yi would at most be given 7. Therefore, Gong Yimo could only open 7 relay stations in Lu Yi. But it was only 7. If she wanted to open them, she could open them. However, he would never have thought that the hotel chain that provided food, lodging, and transportation, the Holy Land for rich merchants, would take the first step after he nodded his head. This would create the glorious Golden Road in the future. How many people would see business opportunities here? How many people would rise on this road? The Golden Road would become a veritable road to wealth in the future. Chapter 333. Then, can you follow this prince into the palace now? Longxing Wuji smiled and gestured for her to enter. His gaze was fixed on her hand that was holding Longxing Ting Shui, indicating that she should let go. Gong Yimo rubbed her head and smiled. You can guarantee my safety, right? Longxing Wuji smiled but didn't say anything. He was the son of Eagle, not that puppet Emperor Yu Qi. Gong Yimo pointed at Longxing Ting Shui and said, what if she takes revenge on me? Longxing Ting Shui was furious. Gong Yimo. Don't push your luck. Gong Yimo looked frightened and shrunk her neck. She looked timidly at Longxing Wuji, implying that his sister was so fierce, why didn't he give her a guarantee? Longxing Wuji looked majestically at his furious sister. When she became obedient, he promised, in Lu Yi, you can come to this prince for anything that happens. Gong Yimo then let go of Longxing Ting Shui. Then it would be impolite for me to refuse. Once Longxing Ting Shui was free, she didn't care about anything else and ran to the old Lu Yi king. Her tears flowed as if she had suffered a great grievance. The old Lu Yi king and the old princess consort hurriedly came down to welcome her. They hugged Longxing Ting Shui and felt heartache. Her good daughter was not only rejected by the people of Dai Yu State who didn't know what was good for her, but also met with such an incident on the road. Her heart was aching to death. The worst thing was that her daughter was back, and the culprit was being protected by her own son, so she couldn't do anything. Thinking of this, she resented her son a little, feeling that he was siding with outsiders. Longxing Ting Shui's head was resting on the old princess consort's body. Her eyes flashed with a fierce light, and she sobbed softly, Mother, this person humiliated me. We can't let her live. The old princess was stunned. Looking at Gong Yimo and her son chatting happily, she could not help but feel a little troubled. From the looks of it, Gong Yimo seemed to have a good idea that could benefit Lu Yi. She could not possibly find trouble with Gong Yimo at this time, right? Gong Yimo was relieved after getting Longxing Wuji's promise. She trusted Longxing Wuji on this point. He was a man of his word and had a good reputation in the 4 countries in her previous life. In short, no matter how angry Longxing Ting Shui and the others were, Gong Yimo still successfully entered the palace. Moreover, she was welcomed in with the etiquette of a distinguished guest. This almost made Longxing Ting Shui grit her teeth. Seeing Gong Yimo lead her people away, Longcheng's Ting Shui loudly said, Mother. Was he going to let her off just like that? Why don't you see what a vixen she is? In Dai Yu State, she didn't even let go of her own younger brother. Now, she's bewitching imperial brother. The old princess consort said awkwardly, but your brother, Mother. Longxing Ting Shui unwillingly stomped her feet and looked at the old king Lu Yi. Imperial brother usually listens to you the most. Father. She looked at the old king Lu Yi with teary eyes. The old king Lu Yi would definitely not interfere with his son's business. When they wanted to catch her at the beginning, they did not expect Gong Yimo to come with the idea of helping Lu Yi prosper. However, seeing his daughter so sad, he could not bear it. After all, Longxing Ting Shui was his daughter that he got when he was 50 years old. Normally, she was more important than his eyes. Ting Shui. Don't worry. The white-haired old king Lu Yi looked in the direction that Gong Yimo and Longxing Wuji left and said in a deep voice. If there's a chance, I, your father, will definitely seek justice for you. Seeing that he was being perfunctory, Longxing Ting Shui rolled her eyes and said while sobbing, Big brother values her, because she can provide strategies. When she tells us the details, Father, you must kill her. As she spoke, she added another dose of strong medicine. You must know that she has a sharp weapon that even Dai Yu State's emperor covets. If she dies, it will be best for our Lu Yi. At most, we will become enemies with Dai Yu State. Do you think that I, Lu Yi, will be afraid of Dai Yu State? It had to be said that Long Qingting Shui was smart. However, she used her intelligence to harm others. Every word she said to sow discord was on point. When the old King Lu Yi heard this, he felt that it made sense. After she told him the entire plan, he would kill her. Moreover, if Gong Yimo died, no one would be able to obtain the legendary sharp weapon on her. Then, even if Lu Yi offended the Dai Yu State, what was there to be afraid of? After all, Gong Yimo's threat level, in some cases, was even stronger than the Dai Yu State. At this moment, he was really thinking about this problem. Seeing this, Long Qingting Shui was happy in her heart. Gong Yimo, you're dead meat. Lu Yi is not the Dai Yu State. I will let you die a splendid death. When Gong Yimo arrived at the Lu Yi Palace, Sikong and the rest went to rest. As for her, she was personally led to the residence by King Lu Yi. We'll talk about the details tomorrow. I'm so tired today. When she saw the place, Gong Yimo said tiredly. She thought of something and her hand that was about to open the door paused. You won't wake up tomorrow and find your head separated from your body, right? She looked at King Lu Yi suspiciously. Long Qingting Wuji laughed. He realized that in front of Gong Yimo, he was always very easy to laugh. Don't worry and sleep. If you're still worried, why don't you come to my bedroom and sleep together? Gong Yimo shivered in disgust. Forget it. If I sleep with you, your sister will say that I'm the reincarnation of a fox charm and came here to seduce you. Isn't that the case? Long Qingting Wuji suddenly moved closer. His body had the smell of sunshine. Even in the winter, it gave people the feeling of the scorching sun. At this moment, his deep eyes were lowered. When his beautiful eyes were close, Gong Yimo even felt that the blue in his eyes was deeper than the sea. Although it was very beautiful, it was just admiring. She pushed Long Qingting Wuji. If you have something to say it properly. Don't come so close. Long Qingting Wuji blocked her at the door and said in an extremely domineering manner, You're seducing me, ah. Did you forget the first time we met, how you treated me, en? The word en in his deep voice had a kind of bewitching feeling. Gong Yimo also laughed. What did I do to you? How come I don't remember? Right now, I want to go in and rest. Move aside. After saying that, she pushed the door open. But even though she moved quickly, Long Qingting Wuji was also fast. He forcefully squeezed into Gong Yimo's room and pushed Gong Yimo against the door with a backhand. This kind of teasing action made Gong Yimo's face turn cold. She calmed down and said dangerously. If I were you, I would definitely not do something like playing with fire. Long Qingting Wuji also laughed. Don't worry, I have no interest in a little bean sprout like you. Little bean sprout? Gong Yimo laughed. So it turns out that the person with such beautiful eyes is actually blind. Then what are you doing, forcing your sister's mother to misunderstand me? Do you think that I'm not dying fast enough? Long Qingting Wuji's muscular body once again pressed closer. He stared at her with a kind of domineering and overbearing pressure. This prince only wants to return the nameplate. Gong Yimo laughed and used her strength to push him away. Seeing him take a few steps back, Gong Yimo revealed a languid smile. Nameplate, ah, don't worry, I've already prepared to return it to you. But you'll have to wait until I go back. Long Qingting Wuji narrowed his eyes dangerously. Gong Yimo, don't be so ungrateful. This is Lu Yi. Gong Yimo laughed. What a coincidence, I'm famous for being ungrateful. After saying that, she spread out her hands and said with a kind of infuriating tone. What can you do to me? Chapter 334. Seeing Gong Yimo like this, Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth in anger, wishing he could give her a good beating. Gong Yimo, do you know that sometimes you are especially infuriating? She yawned, she was really sleepy. If you don't leave now, I will anger you to death, do you believe it? Saying that, she pulled the door open. Hurry up and leave. With your name tag, my life in Luyi will be guaranteed. Don't worry, I will return it to you when I leave. I mean what I say. Longqing Wuji narrowed his eyes and said indifferently. So you already knew that this day would come, and purposely took away my name tag. Longqing Wuji seemed to have discovered something. You already wanted to come to Luyi. Gong Yimo's expression was calm, without a trace of embarrassment from being exposed. I don't know what you are talking about. If you don't leave now, I will shout that you are molesting me. Longqing Wuji took a few steps forward, the danger in his eyes seemed to have materialized. Gong Yimo. In Luyi, you better not play any tricks. And don't have any bad intentions, otherwise. What if it's a good thing? Gong Yimo suddenly raised her head and interrupted him. At such a close distance, he could clearly see that there was no evil in her eyes, only sincerity. Longqing Wuji was suddenly stunned. Gong Yimo deliberately wanted to do good things in Luyi. Don't tease him, she was a ruthless person who ate people without spitting out their bones, a little wild horse who wanted a yard after taking an inch. Gong Yimo smiled faintly. She really came with good intentions, but even if she said it, he wouldn't believe her. She was too lazy to say it, so she just asked. King Luyi, this little girl knows that you are ambitious, then can you tell this little girl, why are you so eager to do business with Yuhing? Speaking of this, Longqing Wuji's face showed some hesitation. Gong Yimo said it for him, every winter is the hardest time, right? I walked from Luyi all the way to Huaqing. It's still okay under the emperor's foot, but the more bitter the place, the more people don't have enough to eat, so most of them stay at home and don't move, to reduce consumption. In many places, they only have one meal a day, and you want to change the situation, so you want to build an ancient horse road, to buy food in Yuhing in winter, right? Longqing Wuji suddenly took a step back, not daring to look at her. After all, she saw his family starving, and even said it was really embarrassing for him as the king. Gong Yimo's gaze. What's there to be embarrassed? Gong Yimo said indifferently. You actively take care of the people's livelihood. Unlike your brother, who wants to use war to plunder, you want to develop trade. From this, I can see that you are a good leader. Her direct praise actually made Longqing Wuji's heart explode with joy for a moment. But he held it in, and still looked at Gong Yimo seriously, with a probing look, as if he was considering the truth of her words. Gong Yimo looked at him, striking while the iron was hot. She asked, if. I'm saying if I can solve Lu Ye's food problem, how, will you thank me? Longqing Wuji laughed, how about giving yourself to me? He didn't take Gong Yimo's words to heart. If it was solved that way, his ancestors wouldn't have worked so hard to take over the Central Plains. The Central Plains was rich, but those weak people occupied the most fertile land in the mainland, to be able to eat their fill, wear warm clothes, and have ample food. Their Lu Yi also wanted these. Gong Yimo saw that he didn't believe her, but she wasn't angry. She just said, actually, I don't really agree with Lu Ye's ancestors' way of thinking. Do you think that as long as you take over the Central Plains, there will be endless food coming in? That's too naive. Longqing Wuji smiled a little cruelly, looking at her with eyes sharper than an eagle's. Since we've already taken over the Central Plains, why can't we take the people of the Central Plains as slaves, and make them cultivate food? Gong Yimo didn't get angry when she heard him say that, and said slowly, give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and there's nothing more reliable than holding it in the palm of your hand. Sometimes, you can't even rely on yourself, and you still want to rely on others. Her words made Longqing Wuji ponder deeply. what are you trying to say? He looked at Gong Yimo, or, do you really have a way? When he asked this, he didn't believe it at all. Gong Yimo was a princess after all, even if she was smarter than normal people and thought of all kinds of ways to build transportation, he didn't think that she knew much about the hardships of the people. But what he didn't know was that not only did Gong Yimo understand, but she also knew about the hardships of the people, and even created a hellish world single-handedly. The chances are 50 to 50. She thought of something, and said in a melancholy tone, I'm also not very confident, let's see what price you can pay. Daiyu State's princess always did what she said, was she saying a trap, or was there really such a thing? Longqing Wuji couldn't help but think deeply, this question is too important, this prince can't answer you now. Gong Yimo grinned, it's fine, it's almost the new year, I still want to spend it with you, the future is long. Then she pointed outside, there is a way, but if you don't let me rest now, I definitely won't be able to think of it. When the time comes, the one who will lose out will definitely not be the rich Daiyu State. Longqing Wuji had the urge to bite her again. Grinding his teeth. Forget it. She must be tired from the long journey, since that's the case, I won't ask her, just like what she said, the future is long. After Longqing Wuji left, Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. This kind of person who was born with a strong aura, it was very stressful to communicate with. Of course, no matter what, she wasn't afraid. As for solving the food problem, Gong Yimo wasn't just talking about it, she really had a certain degree of confidence in doing so. But before doing so, she had to consider a problem. One was the domestic problem of Daiyu State, and the other was the foreign problem. Let's not talk about the country first. Let's talk about Lu Yi. Lu Yi already had a strong army. If there was no shortage of food, would they settle down and live their own lives and work in peace and contentment? Or would they expand their ambition to conquer the Central Plains and conquer the world? She still had the military in her hands, so she wasn't afraid of Lu Yi going to war, but she didn't want to go to war. She wanted the four countries to be in a stable and self-sufficient state, just like the countries in the future. She didn't want to go to war. In the end, it all boiled down to the problem of the people's livelihood. The reason why people went to war was because of greed and their own lack of resources, just like Lu Yi. They lacked food, and the people didn't have enough to eat, so naturally, they would have evil thoughts. This was the root of evil. What if the people were rich? Everyone had enough food and clothing, and the country was self-sufficient. Who would be willing to leave their homeland to spy on others? On such a relatively stable basis, as long as there was a good lead, the countries would work hard to develop their own advantages and make up for their disadvantages, so that they wouldn't fall behind each other. Then, they would be able to form a win-win situation. When all the hard work would be rewarded, who would have the time to start a war? Did they think that their lives were too easy? Of course, it was still too early to say all these. Moreover, there was a limit, and timing was very important. Being too hasty would only backfire, so she had to think carefully and seize the opportunity. Therefore, she slept very soundly, all the way until the sun was high in the sky. Chapter 335. When she woke up, she washed up and someone brought her food. The servant girl knelt down in front of Gong Yimo and lowered her head. My lady, it's time to eat. Gong Yimo smelled the food from afar and walked over in a daze. She picked up her chopsticks and prepared to eat. It seemed like King Lu Yi had specially instructed that the food was to follow the style of Daiyu State. Have the people I brought eaten? Gong Yimo asked casually. The servant girl lowered her head and said, they have their own courtyard and used the food they brought to cook. They've already eaten. Gong Yimo's hand paused and she couldn't help but sweat. The people trained by Gong Dai were much more vigilant than her. She felt around in her sleeves and took out a silver hairpin. The servant girl saw that she was going to use the hairpin to test for poison and didn't say anything. Gong Yimo tested it and the hairpin didn't change color. The servant girl heaved a sigh of relief and didn't say anything. Seeing that the servant girl was so nervous that she clutched her clothes tightly, Gong Yimo smiled and stood up. The servant girl panicked. But you haven't eaten. I'm not eating. I'll eat with your king in the future. She actually threw down her chopsticks and ran away. Lu Ye's palace wasn't big. The entire palace was built with huge yellow stones and was called the Golden Fort. Although it wasn't as graceful as a small bridge in flowing water, it wasn't as exquisite as a cornice. But it was rough and had a different kind of beauty. When Gong Yimo arrived, Longqing Wuji hadn't eaten yet. He was still reading documents and his eyes were dark. It seemed like he must have interrogated Chakran last night. After all, this was the most important thing. Lu Yi was a country made up of many tribes. There were 3 big clans and the change of kings was very common. So there had always been only King Lu Yi and no Emperor Lu Yi. In addition, Longqing Wuji had just taken the throne not long ago and the centralization of power wasn't stable. It was no wonder that he racked his brains every day and didn't smile. But it didn't matter. Gong Yimo believed that if he was given time to grow, Lu Yi would become an emperor sooner or later. Seeing that Gong Yimo was requesting an audience, King Lu Yi realized that it was already past mealtime. His waist was hurting a little. He had not rested for the entire night, so he was very dispirited. However, when he saw Gong Yimo, the dispiritedness on his face disappeared and was replaced with caution and shrewdness. He did not want to be taken advantage of by this little girl from Daiyu State again. What are you doing here? Longqing Wuji kept a straight face, but in his heart, he was thinking that he would sleep after eating. What should he eat? Gong Yimo naturally didn't know what he was thinking. Looking at his dignified face, she didn't know why, but he was somewhat similar to Gong Qing. She pursed her lips and smiled. After thinking about it, I feel that it's not safe at my place. So I've decided that while I'm in Lu Yi, I want to freeload at your place, 2 meals a day. Longqing Wuji was a little stunned. He would usually go to his woman's place for dinner. Although he hadn't married Flower Boat Wuyo yet, he still had a lot of women. This way, he looked at Gong Yimo and pondered, was this little girl intentionally seducing him? If Gong Yimo knew what he was thinking, she would definitely vomit blood. In this palace, there were 3 people with high positions eyeing her covetously. She was only thinking about her own life, so she was willing to compromise, okay? I came here hungry. You haven't eaten yet, right? Gong Yimo looked at Longqing Wuji with a pair of big eyes. He couldn't help but stare blankly, then a trace of a smile flashed through his eyes. No, but, since you're here, this prince will bring you to try Lu Ye's specialty things. After saying that, he actually brought Gong Yimo out of the palace. The 2 of them urged their horses to gallop, with 2 guards following closely behind. Huacheng was the capital city newly built by Lu Yi. Because Lu Ye's king changed quickly, and Lu Yi was mostly nomadic, there weren't many people who settled down. The entire Huacheng wasn't big. Very quickly, they left the city and arrived at the boundless grassland. It was already the middle of the first month, which was the coldest time. So that kind of boundless greenery couldn't be seen, only desolation. Longqing Wuji stopped his horse. He also didn't know why he trusted Gong Yimo so much that he only brought 2 guards and brought her out. At this moment, he was sitting high on the horse's back, looking at the desolation. He said softly. It's a pity that the time isn't right. In this place during summer, the tender grass is the most fertile. There are many people who will herd sheep, cows, and horses here. After saying that, a green ocean seemed to appear in his eyes. As far as the eye could see, the sky was blue and clear. The wind blew on his face, swimming in it, there was an indescribable profoundness. Gong Yimo also seemed to think of that kind of beautiful scenery, and said with a smile, "I think I will stay here until then, and then we will come out to horse race." "Okay, horse race." Not knowing why, Longxing Wuji suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in his heart, so he only agreed to horse race and didn't promise her to go back. Gong Yimo touched her stomach again. "After running for so long, I'm starving. You are bringing me out to drink the wind." Her face was hurting from the wind. "We're almost there." Longxing Wuji glared at her, snorted and continued to lead the horse. Gong Yimo was helpless, thinking whether she should take some food from her space to eat. There seemed to be a piece of chocolate left. No. It would be gone if she ate it. Gong Yimo cried in her heart, because she liked to eat. There were a lot of delicious food in her space, most of them were snacks. But after so many years, although the ones she brought wouldn't spoil, there were only a few left. Finally, they arrived at a small tribe. The tribe was originally very quiet, but when they saw Longxing Wuji, everyone revealed a happy expression. Longxing Wuji looked at her with some pride. "This is the Chair tribe. There are many warriors in the tribe. This king often competed with them when I was young." When he said this, his eyebrows were slightly raised, looking very domineering. But Gong Yimo knew his bitterness. Lu Yi had 3 great bloodline aristocratic families, Longxing Wuji, Huazhou, and Baiji. When he was young, the old Lu Yi didn't have any achievements, and the Baiji tribe took away his position as king, so even though Longxing Wuji had a noble status at that time, he still had to live a life of hiding. Later on, Baiji Lu Yi died an unnatural death, and the children of the Baiji family were weak and sickly. Many leaders then thought of Longxing Wuji's older brother, because although their family had fallen at that time, their bloodline was still noble. But his older brother was the kind of person who was muscular but simple-minded. He listened to other people's instigation and tried to kill his younger brother many times, so in the end, Longxing Wuji directly overthrew his older brother and succeeded. At this time, an old man came forward. He bowed to Longxing Wuji, his pair of old eyes looking at Gong Yimo with some puzzlement. Gong Yimo's appearance was also very good, but compared to them, there was still a big difference. Baiji Lu Yi waved his hand. "It's fine, this is my friend." Only then did they receive Gong Yimo warmly. Chapter 336. At noon, the whole tribe was very quiet. They were not rich. Only at night would they be a little more cheerful. There was no other way. The winter in Lu Yi was really long and hard to endure. But the arrival of King Lu Yi made the tribe livelier. Many young women came in to deliver food and stared at Longxing Wuji, not embarrassed at all. Old Chair prepared meat and wine to personally serve Longxing Wuji. Longxing Wuji was their tribe's benefactor, and they all welcomed him. The fragrance of wine and meat filled the main tent, but only Old Chair accompanied Longxing Wuji to eat. Most of the people returned to their own tents after greeting them. It was not like summer now, and there was too little food. They couldn't afford to party with the entire tribe. Longxing Wuji felt a little uncomfortable. "Where are roads and weir?" Old Chair sighed. "It hasn't snowed recently, so they wanted to see if there was any prey. They haven't returned yet." What prey could there be at this time? There were only some wild beasts. Longxing Wuji fell silent, and the wine in his hand became tasteless. Old Chair saw that he was in low spirits and smiled comfortingly. "It's been 2 years. It was harder in the early years, but didn't you get through it?" Longxing Wuji put down his wine cup. In front of Old Chair, he was as obedient as a child. "I'm useless." The old man waved his hand. "You can't say that. You are our tribe's benefactor, and you have done very well. Everyone remembers your kindness and believes that you can lead the Lu Yi people to glory." At this moment, he lowered his head slightly, feeling guilty. At this time, someone came in and whispered something in old Chair's ear. It seemed that someone was sick. Old Chair frowned and got up to leave. Because Longqing Wuji was familiar with him, there were not many restrictions between them. He waved his hand, and old Chair left. Gong Yimo saw that he was in low spirits and asked with a smile, "Is this the delicious food you said you would treat me to?" Longqing Wuji came back to his senses and looked at the lamb in the middle. He felt a little conflicted, and thought to himself that he would compensate him when he left. The lamb roasted by old Char's wife is the freshest. When I was young. He used the word I, and his expression was a little gloomy. When I was young, the thing I looked forward to the most in the winter was to be able to eat this during the holidays. Gong Yimo took a bite and sighed in her heart. She had to admit that it was delicious. There was a rank odor in the tent that could not be dispelled, but she did not know what she used to roast the lamb. It did not have any rank odor, and the meat was tender. It was a delicacy that you would never be able to eat. How is it? Seeing that Gong Yimo's eyes lit up, Longqing Wuji was a little proud. Is it Lu Ye's special delicacy? Without waiting for Gong Yimo's reply, he took a few bites himself. Suddenly, his expression became strange. It's a pity that you can't eat it often. Gong Yimo was also very clear that if it wasn't for Longqing Wuji's arrival, this kind of lamb would definitely not be killed. The value of raising it would be much higher than raising it now. You seem to be very familiar with this place. Gong Yimo asked curiously. Longqing Wuji didn't hide it from her. When I was young, I hid here for a few years. Old Char doted on me a lot. As he spoke, his expression suddenly darkened. I was very close to old Char's sons. Originally, it wasn't just Rode and Weir. He also had a younger son who was the same age as me. His name was Bai Jia. He suddenly frowned and said faintly, but one year, the winter was very cold, and there was very little food. It was also a war, so I hid here with the entire tribe. During the process, I survived, but he starved to death. Before he died, he always said that he was hungry. I fed him blood, but he still died. It was unknown if it was because of the scene, but Longqing Wuji unexpectedly recalled such a past event. Behind him, the two attendants revealed an unbearable expression. At that time, when Lu Yi was in turmoil, such things were not uncommon. So from that time onwards, I swore that even in the cold winter, all the people in Lu Yi would be able to eat their fill and wear warm clothes, just like the people in other countries. They wouldn't have to suffer so much. Gong Yimo lowered her head to eat her meat and didn't reply. At this moment, Longqing Wuji seemed to have made up his mind. He looked at her seriously and said in a low voice. Yesterday, you said you had a solution. I didn't believe you and I couldn't answer you. But now, I can make a promise. Gong Yimo looked up at him and saw that he was staring at her with a burning gaze. The heat and aura around him were like the sun. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Every word he said was loud. As long as you can solve this problem, solve the problem of Lu Ye's winter food shortage. As long as you don't ask me to betray my country and family, I will repay you in any way you want. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up and narrowed like a little fox. I can't promise you anything, but, if I can do it, can you really do it? If I go back on my word, I won't enter Eagle Deity Temple after I die. Good. Gong Yimo patted his shoulder with her oily hand. This is what I want. Come, let's eat. As she spoke, she tore a big piece of meat for him. Longqing Wuji was still feeling emotional. At this moment, he didn't really believe that Gong Yimo had a solution, but at least she had a solution. It was better than him not knowing what to do now. So the two of them ate the meat and drank the wine as if they were venting their anger. After eating and drinking to their fill, Longqing Wuji felt that the distance between him and Gong Yimo seemed to have closed up. He asked in a low voice, "I'm curious. You helped me so much about the horse passage. Yes, you also helped Yuheng a lot. But what good did that do to you and Daiyu State?" He didn't mention that Gong Yimo wanted to solve the food problem. After all, it hadn't happened yet. As a man, he didn't want to put pressure on a little girl. Gong Yimo had drunk some wine. Old Chair saw that they were chatting happily and didn't come in to disturb them. She became more impudent. At this moment, both her hands were oily and she was holding on to the meat as she spoke incoherently. "It doesn't do me any good." Longqing Wuji was happy. Gong Yimo was such a shrewd person, but she was so selfless. He didn't believe it even if he said it out loud. People's thoughts change. She ate the meat, but her eyes were staring at the fire in the tent. "In the past, I thought that it would be good if I was rich. I had money and could do a lot of good things. Later, I realized that it was possible to do it alone, but the power was too small. So I instigated everyone to work hard and hoped that Daiyu State would be rich. Later, I understood what it meant to be the tallest tree in the forest. At that time, I thought that it would be good if everyone was rich. No one would have to worry about anyone else. Even the poorest people could use their own hands to live a good life. And now..." She took a big bite of the meat and felt that she had found her ultimate goal in life. But she didn't say it out loud. Anyway, time would prove her thoughts. "You just need to know that I'm sincerely helping you, Lu Yi," Gong Yimo said in a low voice. "Sometimes, people have to be broad-minded and open-minded. Don't be afraid that others will surpass you if you help others. With tolerance and wisdom, many things can be a win-win situation." Unfortunately, Longqing Wuji didn't fully understand what she said. When she said it later, he finally understood what she meant by a win-win situation. Chapter 337. That night, Longqing Wuji's Divine Eagle Palace was in a heated argument. If it was a normal matter, it would have been fine. However, when Longqing Ting Shui woke up from her sleep and told Wang Luyi about Gong Yimo whipping her, Longqing Duode was furious. He was already so old, yet he insisted on seeking justice from Gong Yimo. However, he was stopped by Longqing Wuji. That was why they were arguing. "Wuji. That's your sister." The white-haired Duode slammed the table angrily. Beside him, the old Wang Fei was sobbing. Longqing Wuji was having a headache from their argument. He had kept this matter a secret because he was afraid they would cause trouble. Gong Yimo was in the wrong, but he knew his sister's personality. She must have done something. Now, they were complaining about her. "Father, what do you want?" Longqing Wuji was a little impatient. He did not have deep feelings for his parents, but he still respected them. However, that did not mean they could influence his decisions. Duode looked at his wife and said in a low voice, "This time, everyone who went to Daiyu State must be killed." Longqing Wuji was shocked. Ridiculous. Those people did not do anything wrong. Why should they pay for his sister's mistake? When Longqing Wuji roared, the two elders did not dare to say anything. However, when he thought of his crying daughter, Duode braced himself and said, "Those people are useless." When Ting Shui was in Daiyu State, they did not want to help her. Otherwise, why would she be sent back? They could not even keep an eye on a woman on the road. It caused Ting Shui to suffer such a thing. This last incident was even worse. Gong Yimo, a person from Daiyu State, whipped our Lu Ye's princess in front of them. They actually stood by and watched. "Wuji. You still dare to use such a person?" His words made Longqing Wuji feel uncomfortable. It was mainly because he was not there and did not know the truth. However, now that he heard it, he felt that Buji did not do well. Duode struck while the iron was hot. His eyes flashed fiercely. Perhaps Buji and the others have already been bribed by that woman called Gong Yimo. From what I see, she made it sound so dignified, saying that she wants to cooperate with Lu Yi. Who knows what she's selling in her gourd? It's winter now. She might be up to something by coming here. Longqing Wuji could not help but think of Gong Yimo's appearance when he was drinking with her in the afternoon. Her eyes were clear, without a hint of gloominess. Duode's eyes narrowed slightly, and his old face was tense. It was extremely frightening. He continued to add fuel to the fire. Limitless. Don't forget that when Hua Zhou came back, she said that she almost made it impossible for Gong Yimo to become a princess. Moreover, this time, Ting Shui almost made Gong Yimo lose her reputation. She's just a woman. How can she not resent her at all? How could they still prioritize the country? I'm afraid that even men can't be so free and easy. He clearly has ulterior motives. Enough. Longqing Wuji had not rested well in the first place, and his words made him even more annoyed. He did not want to suspect that Gong Yimo had ulterior motives, but in this position, when he heard such words, he had no choice but to put up his guard against her. After all, she was a citizen of Daiyu State. This prince has said before that I will protect her in Lu Yi. Don't mention her matters again. Duode gritted his teeth, hating his son's stubbornness. Since you won't do anything to her, then Buji and the others should die. If they spout nonsense, Ting Shui's reputation will be tarnished. Who would be willing to marry a woman who was rejected by Daiyu State and humiliated by her own uncle? Are you forcing her to her death? Then he said gloomily, or you can try to deal with them. If they didn't collude with Daiyu State, Gong Yimo definitely wouldn't plead for them. If Gong Yimo really did plead for them, then there must be a conspiracy. At this moment, the old princess consort also started crying. Are you going to watch your sister suffer like this? Haven't you always doted on her? Although she was in pain, she had never been so troublesome in the past. Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. None of them were easy to deal with. There's no need to talk about this anymore. This prince still has to go to Baiji's house tomorrow. Don't mention it again. With that, he sent the two of them away. He was not a muddle-headed person. Buji might have committed the crime of failing to protect his sister, but he did not deserve to die. Moreover, this was not the most important thing right now. Would his sister, King Lu Yi, still need to worry about marriage? But he never expected that the two of them would be so daring when he let his guard down. The next day, Gong Yimo was still asleep when someone shook her awake. She saw that it was a maidservant she had never met before. My lord. Not good, Father Wang wants to execute Sir Buji and the 1,000 attendants who came back from Daiyu State. Gong Yimo was shocked. Where is your king? The maidservant cried out. The king went to Baiji's house early in the morning. Gong Yimo felt a headache coming on. Then why are you looking for me? This is your country's family matter. The maidservant was stunned. But Sir Buji told me to look for you. He said that you would definitely have a way to save him. He also said that if you save him, he will definitely listen to you in the future. He is a good person, please save him. Gong Yimo's originally dazed mind suddenly flashed with a ray of light. You have found the wrong person. What does the death of 1 or 1,000 Lu Yi people have to do with me, a citizen of Daiyu State? With that, she actually pulled her blanket and wanted to go back to sleep. My lord, the maidservant did not expect Gong Yimo to be so cold-hearted. She hesitated. Didn't she say that she took good care of Lu Yi and the rest? She even stood up for Lu Ye's maidservant. Why is she reacting like this? Finally, she gritted her teeth. My lord, please save him. This servant will go and beg other lords. If you change your mind, I will go to Heavenly Eagle Station. With that, she really left. Not long after, Sikong also came. When he arrived, Gong Yimo had already woken up. His expression was grave. Princess, I heard that the old Lu Yi king took advantage of the fact that Lu Yi went to the Baiji tribe to mobilize his private army to execute those Lu Yi people who came back from Daiyu state. Gong Yimo frowned slightly. This matter has nothing to do with us. If you want to kill them, then kill them. Sikong sighed. Before this subordinate came here, His Highness gave this subordinate the right to contact Lu Ye's spies. They just sent news that the old Lu Yi king had made 2 plans. If you go, he will frame Buji for colluding with you. If you don't go, he will tell the world that it was your idea to execute those 1,000 people. Because you were humiliated in Daiyu state when the stairway to heaven was broken, it was found that Buji colluded with the Hidden Sword sect. So this time, he used the excuse of cooperating with Lu Yi to force Lu Yi to kill them to give you an explanation. He also said that the Hidden Sword sect and Buji were warriors from the same sect. Therefore, Long Cheng's Ting Shui did not know anything about this. She was implicated when the engagement was broken. Chapter 338. Shameless. Gong Yimo had not met such people in a long time. It could be said that they had no bottom line. Were they trying to seize the opportunity to make a false accusation? Taking advantage of the fact that no one knew the truth, inverting black and white and leaving a preconceived notion in the world. If she went, it would be impossible for a person from Daiyu to save someone from Lu Yi. She would not be able to explain herself. If she did not go, after their propaganda, Lu Ye's people would have a preconceived notion that she was unforgiving. Killing the mastermind was not enough, and she would not even let the innocent people off. That was a total of 1,000 people. Even if Longqing Wuji returned, the matter had already happened. Would he announce the truth for an outsider like her? Would he say that Longqing Ting Shui was the one who did the evil, and that it was Longqing Ting Shui's responsibility to be sent back? Would Longqing Ting Shui be the one who wanted to silence her? Was all this a trap set by his parents and sister to discredit her? Don't make me laugh. In the end, they were a family, and she was an outsider. Gong Yimo clenched her fists. She could not let them succeed. Otherwise, she would not be able to stay in Lu Yi. Even if she stayed, it would be difficult for her to move a single step. Also, she would not give Longqing Ting Shui a chance to clear her name. Furthermore, she wanted to frame her and step on her to clear her name. Just wait and see. Princess. Where are you going? Gong Yimo said without turning her head. I'm going to kill someone. Si Kong was startled. He quickly gathered his brothers and followed Gong Yimo's lead. It was fine if this little ancestor wanted to kill someone. But if she hurt them, they would be in trouble. At this time, many people in Hua City had gone to Tianning stage. This place was equivalent to Daiyu State's market. At this time, it was full of people kneeling. Everyone's head was covered, and their faces could not be seen clearly. However, they all seemed to be injured. At this time, they were all kneeling there quietly without making a sound. Many people did not understand why so many people were kneeling on the stage. Could it be that they were going to kill them? On the high platform, other than a minister who presided over the proceedings, the old King Lu Yi, the old princess consort, and Ting Shui of Longqing were all present. There were even more people below the stage. It was winter, and everyone didn't have much activity. So when they heard the commotion, they all came out to see what was going on. Lu Ye's citizens were not as restrained as Daiyu State citizens. When they saw so many people kneeling on the stage, they couldn't help but ask, who are they? What crime did he commit? At this time, the presiding minister looked at the old King Lu Yi, stepped forward and sat on the main seat, trembling. He shouted loudly. Quiet! Quiet! The voices of the crowd gradually quieted down. This minister was a bit old and had a full beard. However, at this moment, his expression was dispirited and he seemed to be in a difficult position. After a long while, he finally spoke. Yesterday, little Princess Lu Yi came back with Princess Gu of Daiyu State. So the people were a bit confused. Although the news was sealed, they still knew that the little princess was sent back yesterday. However, they didn't know the inside story and couldn't make any deep guesses. This time, the little princess was sent back by Daiyu State not because she was lacking, but because of these wicked servants. As Lu Ye's ministers and the princess's retinue, when they arrived in Daiyu State, not only did they not help the princess choose a husband, but they also took revenge for their own selfish reasons. This angered the Daiyu State's emperor. Everyone knows Cangjin. I, Lu Yi, am the second bravest warrior. However, because his senior brother was killed by Princess Gu of Daiyu State, he colluded with Ambassador Buji and framed Princess Gu of Daiyu State, causing her reputation to be ruined. Therefore, the Daiyu State's emperor was furious. So he sent the little princess back. Princess Gu of Daiyu State also came and demanded an explanation from me, Lu Yi. When the people heard this, they all felt that this Daiyu State's princess was a bit unreasonable. She killed people first, and her reputation was ruined so easily. It must be because she was lacking in her own body. After all, flies don't bite a seamless egg. Seeing that many people were unhappy, the minister continued, Princess Gu of Daiyu State is also here for the cooperation between the two states. She said that we will talk about cooperation after an explanation is given. Therefore, in order to appease Princess Gu of Daiyu State's anger, Father Wang has decided to execute these 1,000 people. His words caused a huge uproar. Why should we execute them? Someone shouted in dissatisfaction, can't we just execute the mastermind? That's right. Daiyu State is too much. The little princess was implicated for no reason and we haven't even settled the score with them. How dare they push their luck? Bah! What Princess Gu of Daiyu State? She's obviously not a good person. Is she trying to threaten Lu Yi with the cooperation? We can't kill them, not a single one of them. We want that Princess Gu of Daiyu State to get out of Lu Yi. Princess Gu of Daiyu State to get out of Lu Yi. The people were all angry. In the end, they shouted until their faces turned red, and their voices became louder and louder. Long Chang's Ting Shui, who was sitting on the stage, smiled faintly. She wanted to act first and report later. She wanted to seize the opportunity. So what if Brother Wang was angry? Father Wang and Mother Empress were still there. On the other hand, Gong Yimo's reputation would be ruined and she would be sent back to Daiyu State with her tail between her legs. What cooperation? She, Lu Yi, didn't need it. Seeing how angry the people were. Many people on the stage were also twisting their bodies to resist. However, their heads were covered with linen, so their expressions couldn't be seen. Therefore, the people below the stage just thought that they were angry and were crying out for their own injustice. The minister in charge sighed. No matter how angry the people were, he had to kill these people. Because only with their deaths could Gong Yimo's crime be established. Moreover, the angrier the people were, the happier the little princess would be. Now, they just had to kill these people before Gong Yimo arrived. Previously, they heard that she wasn't coming. It was good that she wasn't coming. Carry these 1,000 lives on your back and go back to Daiyu State. Execute. 10 executioners stepped forward. Lu Ye's execution was different from Dai Yu State's. They didn't need to behead him. Just a stab to the heart would be enough. Moreover, they would start from the lowest status. They would make the leader of the criminals feel the fear of death and repent. You can't kill him. Many people were so angry that their eyes were about to pop out. They were filled with grief and indignation. That Princess Gu of Dai Yu State was nothing. She actually wanted to kill him without even interrogating him. However, they were still ordinary people. When they saw the blood on the stage, who would dare to step forward? They all cursed Gong Yimo thousands of times in their hearts. Their eyes were red. More than 100 people died in an instant. The stage was covered in blood. Many people couldn't bear it and turned their heads away. Some of them gritted their teeth and looked at the scene angrily. However, no one realized why those people were covering their heads and why there wasn't a single scream. At this moment, they only hated Dai Yu State and Princess Gu of Dai Yu State to the extreme. Buji was the person at the front. When he heard the sound of corpses falling behind him and the smell of blood, his loyalty was destroyed by anger for the first time. He couldn't wait to cut Long Qingting Shui into pieces. The people accompanying him were all his brothers. They were all very loyal and wouldn't say anything. Why did they have to kill them and shift the blame to others? At the moment of death, he only felt anger. There was no fear. At this moment, a voice filled with anger came from afar. How interesting. They say that shameless people are invincible. Long Qingting Shui, you really opened my eyes. Chapter 339. Gong Yimo's voice made Long Qingting Shui turn pale with fright. She even stood up. What's going on? Wasn't Gong Yimo not coming? Why did she suddenly change her mind? But very quickly, she calmed down and sat back down. So what if she came now? Everyone here was her people. So what if she had the ability to speak eloquently? None of the people here would listen to her. Furthermore, she still had a backup plan. Gong Yimo rushed over using her qinggong. Seeing that there were already 200 to 300 people dead on the stage, she directly landed on the stage and used her internal energy to push the executioners away, stopping the massacre. Everyone was curious about the warrior who suddenly saved everyone when they heard Long Qingting Shui shout. Guguo Princess, don't go too far. Guguo Princess. She is the Guguo Princess. Many people's first impression of her instantly disappeared. Their eyes turned red and they couldn't wait to rush up to the stage. Get out of Lu Yi. People of Dai Yu State, get out of Lu Yi. Get out of Lu Yi. Almost everyone, regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, shouted at Gong Emo on the stage. No one thought about her motive for appearing here. It seemed that Long Qingting Shui had stirred up people's hearts thoroughly and ruthlessly. Long Qingting Shui looked at Gong Yimo with a smug expression. From this angle, she couldn't see Gong Yimo's face from the stage. But as a princess, being insulted like this, she would definitely be embarrassed and lose her rationality in anger, right? Especially when she was wronged and no one listened to her explanation. That kind of feeling must be very painful. Old Lu Yi King and old Wang Fei also thought so. No matter how powerful Gong Yimo was, she was still a girl. In this kind of situation, they wanted to see how she would turn the tide. Seeing that the people were so agitated that they bent down to pick up stones to throw, Gong Yimo opened her mouth. Her voice was filled with internal energy and drowned out everyone. Don't you want to know why these people didn't say anything when they were about to die? When she said this, she instantly grasped the key point. No one could answer, so the scene suddenly became strangely quiet. Long Qingting Shui stood on the stage and couldn't stop her in time. A bearded man raised his machete and slashed towards Gong Yimo, but was easily pushed away by her. She strode forward and tore off the headcloth of a death row prisoner nearby. The commoners were surprised to find that their mouths were gagged. Why did they have to cover his mouth? Were they afraid that he would not be willing to be executed? Many people revealed strange expressions. No. Long Ching Ting Shua exclaimed softly. Gong Yimo had already torn off the cloth covering that person's mouth and cut off his rope. Once he was free, he lay on the ground and coughed violently. Gong Yimo was very fast. With the hidden blade in her hand, she cut the ropes of several people around her. They quickly got up and tore off the things stuffed in their mouths. Old Lu Yi regretted it for a moment. In order to save time, they had captured people and brought them here. If he had known, he would have cut off their tongues one by one. But now, it looked like they were being forced to take that step. At this time, everyone was confused about what had happened. Didn't the princess of Daiyu State want to kill people? Why did she want to save people? But no matter what, it was good that those people survived. No. It's not that the princess of Daiyu State wants to kill us. A man stood up shakily and shouted to the audience, but before he could finish his words, he was shot to death by an arrow. Gong Yimo didn't even have time to turn around. The moment she turned around, she saw the person lying in a pool of blood. Gong Yimo's eyes instantly looked towards Long Ching Ting Shua. The person behind her hadn't put away his bow and arrow. After Zhang died, it seemed that she had found another bodyguard. Seeing Long Ching Ting Shua kill someone, everyone turned to look at her. Long Ching Ting Shua glared angrily with a look of hatred. I didn't expect that I would see through it. These people deserve to die. Although they are Lu Ye's people, when I was in Daiyu State, they repeatedly harmed me. On the way back, they even abused me. I originally thought that I did something wrong, but now it seems that there's something else behind it. Otherwise, why would you save them? The people were confused. They didn't expect there to be such an inside story. Bullying the princess's servants. Then they really didn't deserve to die. One had to know that the little princess was going to be married off for Lu Ye's sake. Why would they do this? As she spoke, her unfriendly gaze landed on Gong Yimo again. Could it be that there was an inside story? There was no other way. Between a citizen and an outsider, they would definitely trust a citizen. Without giving Gong Yimo a chance to explain, Long Ching Ting Shua waved her hand and countless cold arrows shot out from all directions. Long Ching Ting Shua was already prepared. If she didn't want to ruin her reputation, then she wanted her to die without a burial ground. Long Ching Ting Shua stepped forward and narrowed her eyes. She pointed at Gong Yimo loftily and said, Originally, I thought that you and Envoy Buji were exchanging flirtatious glances on the way back. However, as Lu Ye's people, they repeatedly harmed me and almost caused me to not be able to come back. I couldn't help but suspect, that's why I was testing you while dealing with these offending officials. I didn't expect that you would actually take the bait. You, a citizen of Daiyu State, actually came to save Lu Ye's people and still say that you didn't collude? The people were confused. Wasn't it said that the princess of Daiyu State wanted to kill people? How did it become that they were guilty and the little princess wanted to kill them? Moreover, it had escalated to the level of scheming. She even used these guilty officials to test the princess of Daiyu State. That's right. If they didn't collude, why would an outsider like her get involved in Lu Ye's death? Could it be that there really was an affair? Many people looked at Gong Yimo with disdain when they thought of Buji's tall and sturdy figure despite his age. Gong Yimo was furious. However, when she saw that the people below were biased, Gong Yimo knew that without any evidence, they would definitely believe the princess of their own country. No, she had to think of a way. Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't say anything, Long Qingting Shuai learned her lesson and didn't give her a chance to refute. She wanted her to be unable to speak. A cold light flashed in her eyes. With a wave of her hand, thousands of arrows were released. Go to hell. Die in infamy. Die in Lu Ye's hands with endless humiliation. Gong Yimo didn't expect her to be so vicious. At this moment, dozens of people suddenly jumped onto the stage. Sikong and the others had rushed over. At the same time, Lu Ye's people were also shooting arrows. Sikong and the others protected Gong Yimo firmly, but the others weren't so lucky. Many of Lu Ye's people on the stage were killed or injured. Even the executioners didn't manage to escape. The smell of blood became thick. Long Qingting Shui's eyes were red from the killing. She didn't let the archers stop. Today, she had to kill Gong Yimo. Chapter 340. Many people screamed and ran away. Those who stayed behind were the more courageous men. But what was going on here? They still hadn't figured out the situation. Why did the little princess want to kill the princess of Daiyu State? It wasn't that they sympathized with the princess of Daiyu State, but they were afraid that they would become enemies with the Daiyu State. More and more corpses were piling up on the stage. If this continued, those who knew the truth would all die. Gong Yimo waved her hand at the nearest archer. Taking advantage of his injury, she grabbed the bow in his hand and pulled it back. Then, when she pulled the bow back, there was a lit fuse hanging on the arrowhead. She aimed at the defense line on the stage. Although she didn't know what it was, Long Qingting Shui, who had been staring at Gong Yimo, felt the danger. She quickly pulled her parents to dodge. As soon as they dodged, Gong Yimo's arrow landed on the seat in the middle of the stage. Immediately, the entire stone seat was blown to pieces. This loud explosion made everyone stop. Only Gong Yimo raised her bow again and pointed it at Long Qingting Shui. Everyone, stop. If anyone moves again, I'll kill her. In the chaos, no one noticed Gong Yimo's move just now. They only felt that her martial arts were unfathomable. She could even smash a stone seat that was as tall as a person. So, at this moment, when they heard her threat, no one dared to move. Everyone was stunned. Before Long Qingting Shui could react to the death threat, Gong Yimo said to everyone present. Eagle deity above. Gong Yimo of Daiyu State has been wronged. She wants to start a life and death match. Everyone was shocked and revealed a strange expression. What was a life and death match? Everyone in Luyi knew. If the accused felt that he was wronged, then before he died, he could ask for a life and death match. Once the match started, the accused would have to be blindfolded and the accuser would send out one person to fight. No weapons, hidden weapons, or anything like that. It was pure hand-to-hand combat. He didn't need to hurt anyone, he just needed to defeat them. If the controlling party won in the end, he would have the right to defend himself. Actually, Gong Yimo didn't need to do this. She had Dragon City Everlasting's name tag in her hands. As long as she took it out, these people wouldn't dare to touch her. But she didn't, not because she was soft-hearted, but because she was angry. She wanted to give Long Qingting Shui a very wonderful ending. Whether it was the Eagle God Hall, Eagle God Temple, or the Eagle God Platform, as long as there was an image of the Eagle God, one had to obey the laws of the Eagle God. Otherwise, it would be disrespecting Lu Ye's God. Therefore, even if King Lu Yi was here, he could not refuse. Therefore, Long Qingting Shui had no way to refute Gong Yimo's request. At this moment, she was still immersed in Gong Yimo's attack. Could that be the legendary weapon on Gong Yimo? No wonder the Emperor of Daiyu State wanted it. Even a woman like her was tempted after seeing the power of the weapon. The commoners were even more confused. Could it be that the Princess of Daiyu State wanted to start a life and death battle on the Divine Eagle platform that was full of corpses? Sikong still didn't agree. Although this law couldn't be violated, they didn't believe in Long Qingting Shue's character. They felt that she wouldn't be honest. However, Gong Yimo smiled. She didn't look like she was being forced to do this. Instead, she looked a little fierce. Drag the living people away. I have my reasons for doing this. Yes. Sikong subconsciously accepted the order and led his men to drag away Lu Ye's men who were still alive. Then, Gong Yimo threw away her bow and sneered at the other party. Please, Long Qingting Shui. Since I am in Lu Yi, I will use your Lu Ye's method to prove my innocence. Long Qingting Shui looked at Gong Yimo with a complicated expression. At this moment, she didn't know if she wanted her dead or not. At this moment, Gong Yimo had already covered her eyes and curled her finger at Long Qingting Shui. Forget it. No matter what weapon it is, killing her now is the right thing to do. Otherwise, as long as she is alive, there will be variables. Thinking of this, Long Qingting Shui suppressed her regret and sent the most powerful person in her team forward. This person was newly assigned to her by her father. His name was Yuan Jie, and it was said that his ability wasn't below the hidden sword. Furthermore, Gong Yimo was covering her eyes. If he couldn't take her down, then this person didn't have the right to stay by her side. Kill her, no matter what method you use. Long Qingting Shui ordered when Yuan Jie passed by her. Yuan Jie was stunned for a moment, then went up the platform. At this moment, the living person on the platform had already been dragged to the side by Gong Yimo's men. The ground was littered with corpses. Stepping on the puddles of blood was sticky, and the smell of blood couldn't be dispersed. The citizens who were left behind were all tense. They had just experienced a massacre and were already frightened. Now that a life and death situation was about to happen, they were a little numb. They even had the feeling of wanting to see blood and flesh splattering everywhere. When Gong Yimo heard the voice, she knew that it was from the person beside Long Qingting Shui. Close combat. She hadn't experienced this kind of feeling in a long time. The expressions of the citizens below became complicated. Was this Daiyu State's princess trying to prove that she had been wronged? But could her petite body withstand a man's iron fist? They were suddenly curious about who the condor would side with. They wanted to know who was at fault for today's farce. The battle was about to start. Without any fancy words or holding back, Gong Yimo suddenly stepped forward and directly punched the opponent to the ground. The whole process didn't take more than a second. This kind of stimulation was even more intense than the massacre of thousands of arrows. Yuan Jie spat out a mouthful of blood. This blow had directly shattered all of his confidence. Feeling the cold eyes of Long Qing and Ting Shui on the high platform, he trembled and struggled to get up. Once again, he rushed towards Gong Yimo. This kind of unyielding spirit gained the recognition and respect of many people. However, Gong Yimo, because of her cultivation technique, could see every movement around her clearly. She also clearly knew that he was hiding something in his hands when he rushed over. Hence, she stepped forward and grabbed his hand that was about to attack her with one hand. With the other hand, she viciously smashed him towards the condor statue. She was really too ruthless. She directly knocked Yuan Jie's head on the statue's feathers, causing blood to flow out. Clearly, she only needed to beat him to the ground. Was she trying to kill him? Just as the citizens were suddenly enraged, Gong Yimo used one hand to forcefully press Yuan Jie's head against the statue's feathers. With the other hand, she twisted his hand in a strange position. He cried out in pain. His fingers opened weakly, and the cold weapon fell to the ground. Everyone present was speechless. Yuan Jia actually broke the rules. This was like poking a hornet's nest. This person actually broke the rules in a life and death situation. He didn't deserve to be Lu Ye's soldier. Chapter 341. Gong Yimo pulled down the cover in front of her eyes and smiled. Then can I explain myself now? Her smile did not fit in with this scene of slaughter, but everyone below was mesmerized by her smile. There was no trace of killing intent, but her subordinates were already on the verge of death. She casually tossed aside Yuan Jia, whose head was bleeding profusely. Soon, someone came to drag him away. Gong Emo looked at Ting Shui with a smile on her face. She couldn't hold back her anger any longer. However, she had underestimated Long Qing Ting Shui's shamelessness. She said without thinking as she watched Yuan Jia being dragged away. Yuan Jia violated the rules, so this match is invalid. We should start another one. At this moment, the official who had just crawled out from under the table was frightened by Long Qing Ting Shui's gaze and hurriedly said, Yes, it doesn't count. We need another match. Long Qing Ting Shui had thought it through. As long as Gong Yimo covered her eyes again, she would get someone to poison her. Then, she would shoot her to death with 10,000 arrows. She did not believe that she would be able to leave the Divine Eagle stage alive after being poisoned. As for weapons, Gong Yimo only had 2 pieces of clothing on her, so it was impossible for her to have more. The commoners all felt that the little princess's actions were despicable. However, Gong Yimo did not care. She could heavily injure another person before dealing with Long Qing Ting Shui. There was no delay. At this moment, a voice suddenly spoke. Let me. Si Kong stood behind Buji and nodded towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was slightly startled. Looking at the ambassador who still had an arrow stuck in his body, she frowned slightly. Buji had already walked to the center of the stage and said to Long Qing Ting Shui, Divine Eagle. I, Buji, have suffered a great injustice. I want to start a life and death match. Long Qing Ting Shui was furious. This person actually did not die just now. She could not give him a chance. Thus, she spoke loudly. You still say that there is no adultery. You are still injured, but you can't wait to fight for a woman from Dai Yu state. Buji, are you worthy of the trust of your family and royal brother? Bah! He, who had always been loyal, suddenly did something that he would never do in the past. He looked at Long Qing Ting Shui with hatred and a sinister expression. I only hate that I did not see through your vicious heart earlier. You caused so many of my brothers to die so tragically. Let's not talk nonsense, come. As he spoke, he gestured towards Gong Yimo, Guguo Princess, I have implicated you. This is Lu Ye's family matters. Gong Emo didn't expect Boogie to suddenly make a move, which disrupted her plans. However, she was a person who respected brave warriors, so she walked to the side and watched as Ting Shui sent someone down. Of Buji. Of Buji. Come, of. Where is your justice? Have you forgotten what this religion gave you? Ji Chang did not want to go against Buji. Although Buji was not good at martial arts, he was the first to enter the sect. He was their elder. Plus, they would never doubt Buji's loyalty. Ji Chang was in a difficult position. On one side was the princess. On the other side was a respected elder. Buji covered the wound on his shoulder and sneered, looks like, once you are tainted by Long Qing Ting Shui, you will lose your nature. Buji! How dare you! Old Lu Yi King was anxious. It was all Buji's fault for being nosy. Gong Yimo was not dead yet. But time was of the essence. What if Long Qing Ting Shui suddenly returned? I'm being impudent. Buji pointed at himself and laughed. He was tall, but he was very dispirited. His face was full of mockery as he slowly said, Daiyu State has a saying. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. It is talking about people like you. Buji is only glad that the king is not like you. Men. Drag this person who slandered the princess and disrespected the king's father away. Let's see who dares. At this time, another minister also came over with injuries. As soon as he came, more than 10 people who could still move walked over and stood behind Boogie. They never thought that Long Qingting Shui would be so ruthless. She faked the king's decree and gathered them together. Then, without a word, she captured them and was about to kill them. And all of this was just to cover up for Long Qingting Shui. She wanted to use their deaths to frame the princess of Daiyu State. If not for Gong Yimo's timely arrival, they would already be dead. But so what if they were alive? So many of their brothers had died. They had died at the hands of their own people. The Eagle God is the witness of this life and death battle. Even if you are the king's father, you have no right to stop it. The minister was not injured. At this time, he was full of anger. He glared fiercely at Long Qingting Shui. If you dare to go against the Eagle God, the king will demote you to a commoner when he returns. Old Lu Yi King retreated in fear. Seeing him so useless, Long Qingting Shui angrily said to Ji Chang, "What are you waiting for? Defeat them." Ji Chang looked at the dozens of injured people in front of him and then looked at himself who was unharmed. Finally, he gritted his teeth and knelt down on one knee. Eagle God above, Ji Chang has lost this round. He could go against his conscience to help the little princess kill people, but he could not do it to Buji who was still alive. You! Long Qingting Shui was angry and pushed out another person. Kill him. Kill them all. And that person happened to be from the same sect as Buji. How to put it, Zhang Jian and Zhang Xiu were the best in martial arts in the sect. But there were many people in the sect. Some were officials, some were businessmen. But this kind of camaraderie would not disappear. Princess. Your subordinate is useless. He really could not do anything to a group of disabled people. Trash. Long Qingting Shui was so angry that she almost lost her mind. In this kind of dilemma, her body was filled with hostility. She pulled out a guard scimitar and stabbed the person who was unwilling to fight to death on the spot. The commoners were stunned. Was this still their gentle and amiable little princess? Buji laughed loudly. Since I won, then can I plead my case? He looked at Long Qingting Shui with tears in his eyes. Not only do I want to plead my case, I also want to accuse. I want to accuse that woman of her evil deeds. He pointed at Long Qingting Shui, but Long Qingting Shui narrowed her eyes. Buji, you don't care about the lives of your Al family. She actually dared to threaten him in this kind of situation. I believe the king will protect them. Buji did not seem to be threatened by her and said loudly. Eagle God above. Lu Ye's people. I want to plead my case. I did not collude with Daiyu State. I also did not frame this woman. The reason why Daiyu State did not want her was because during an important ceremony in Daiyu State, she slandered the princess of Gu State. The emperor of Daiyu State was furious and sent her back to her country. Chapter 342. Impudent. Shut up. Long Qingting Shui couldn't hold it in anymore. She ignored her parents and ran down. She wanted to kill Boogie with her own hands. He was injured, so what was she afraid of? Seeing Long Qingting Shui running over, Boogie wasn't afraid at all. He continued, "Do you want to know why she was in such a hurry to kill 1,000 of us, Boogie?" The old king of Lu Yi was furious. "Don't slander us. Think about your family. Do you want your family to be discredited? Dying with infamy is discrediting the family. Boogie coughed a few times and said loudly before Long Qingting Shui rushed onto the stage. The reason why Long Qingting Shui wants to kill us as soon as possible and frame the Princess of Dai Yu State is because on the way here, she ran away and fell into the hands of Chakran who wanted to stir up trouble. She was also violated by Chakran. Bastard! Long Qingting Shui rushed forward and left a deep nail mark on Boogie's face. Then she said to the crowd in a panic, "It's not like that. There's no such thing. This is all his slander." However, the commoners were already stunned. This farce had taken a turn that was simply too terrifying. Thinking of the Duke's mansion that was sealed yesterday, the uncle and the niece. Seeing that no one answered her, she stood on the stage and looked around. Finally, she angrily scolded Boogie. "You traitor! Coward! Then why don't you tell me how you saw Gong Yimo whip me?" If the whip mark hadn't healed, Long Qingting Shui would have ripped off her clothes to show everyone. She originally thought that if these people died, Gong Yimo wouldn't be able to defend herself. She didn't expect that in the end, Lu Ye's people would bite her back. "Ha ha ha, so you finally admit it." Boogie couldn't help but laugh. "You!" Long Qingting Shui's eyes flashed with killing intent. She suddenly reached out and pulled the arrow out of Boogie's body. In an instant, blood flowed out. "What are you doing?" The person who was originally supporting Boogie suddenly became angry. Long Qingting Snow waved her hand and all the archers once again raised their arrows. Gong Yimo's expression slightly tightened. She did not expect Long Qingting Snow to be so reckless. After being exposed, she still wanted to kill. Seeing that Long Qingting Shui wanted to kill him to silence him, Boogie laughed loudly. "If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. My Owl family does not have a coward. None of the brothers here are afraid of death." Long Qingting Snow angrily tried to stab Boogie's heart with an arrow, but was caught by Boogie. In the end, he was someone who practiced martial arts. Even if he was injured, he was not someone Long Qingting Snow could deal with. He looked at Long Qingting Shui, the hatred in his eyes rolling, almost dripping blood. With just a glance, Long Qingting Shui panicked and hurriedly retreated as if she had seen a ghost. He grabbed Long Qingting Snow's arrow, but in the end, he didn't dare to stab it back, even though he really wanted to personally avenge his brothers. But the bottom line in his heart made him unable to do it. Boogie made the people behind him retreat and did not look at Long Qingting Shui again. He walked step by step to the side of the eagle god statue and actually knelt down with a plop. His face was filled with grief and indignation, pain and blood. In the end, tears fell. Heavens above, the eagle god is wise. I, Al-Boogie, have been loyal my whole life, have not let down my family, have not let down my king. But now, because of a moment of carelessness, countless brothers have died tragically. I, Al-Boogie, am willing to die. To appease the anger of my brothers who died unjustly, to prove the innocence of the 1,000 people here. After saying that, he actually directly stabbed the arrow into his own chest. My lord. Boogie. Whose indignant voice is that in his ear? He could no longer hear clearly. His eyes were blurry and he seemed to see the eagle god soaring. Poor me, Boogie. I have been loyal my whole life, but I was actually slandered to death by a woman. How unfair the heavens are. His corpse crashed to the ground. When he died, the dozen people who survived cried bitterly. In just a moment, many people also committed suicide. Before they died, their resentful eyes fell on Long Qingting Shui. This person, in order to cover up her ugliness, she actually wanted so many people to pay for her. She is the most hateful person. Long Qingting Shui was already scared silly by the scene in front of her eyes. It seems that ever since Gong Yimo started the life and death situation, things have been going out of control. No, it can still be controlled. Just kill them all. Thinking of this, she continuously retreated and then screamed, "Release the arrows. Release the arrows. Don't stop until they are dead." She did not believe that Gong Yimo still had weapons on her. She wanted to kill Gong Yimo. It would be good if she died. At this moment, there were countless corpses between the Imperial Guards and Gong Yimo. At that moment, Gong Yimo was deep in a pool of blood, facing the arrows from all directions alone. "All of you stop for this king." Suddenly, a stern shout with heavy killing intent came from all directions. Just by hearing the voice, Gong Yimo could imagine how angry Long Qingting Wuji was. Old Lu Yi and old Wang Fei's face suddenly turned pale. Didn't Long Qingting Wuji go to Baiji's house? Why did he come back so quickly? He should be able to complete a round trip at night. But now was not the time to care about that. Instead, it was how they were going to endure Long Qingting Wuji's anger. Long Qingting Wuji was really mad. Especially after seeing the countless people dying on the field, he was so angry that his liver hurt. Those were all his, Lu Ye's, people. Long Qingting Shui hid behind her parents the moment Long Qingting Wuji appeared. Old Lu Yi and old Wang Fei also came down from the high platform, trembling in fear as they faced their son. He came from afar, bringing with him a mountain-like aura, making these people almost kneel down. The commoners had already kneeled down. Although Long Qingting Wuji had only ascended the throne for 2 years, he had worked hard and won the hearts of the people. The cold and sticky blood on the ground stained his leather boots. With every step Long Qingting Wuji took, he wished he could strangle his own parents and sister. His eagle-like eyes looked deeply at the 3 people in front of him, and he said softly, "This king gave you a private army to protect your safety, not for you to kill loyal people, and not for you to help the evildoers." "Wuji, shut up." Long Qingting Wuji directly interrupted his mother's words. He was extremely disappointed with this mother who only knew how to pamper Long Qingting Shui and did not care about the consequences. "Wuji. She is your mother." Old Lu Yi could not hold it in anymore. Wasn't it just killing a few people? For his sister's reputation, why couldn't he kill them? Even if it was the leaders of other tribes, they would do the same when they encountered such a situation. Long Qingting Wuji ignored him. His gloomy eyes fell on Long Qingting Shui, causing her to tremble. Long Qingting Shui. Royal brother, she cowered as she looked at Long Qingting Wuji. That appearance, where was the ferocious look from before? The commoners gasped in amazement, but their hearts gradually formed their own judgment. In this farce, it was clear who was right and who was wrong. Chapter 343. You still have the cheek to call me. Longqing Wuji was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at the corpses on the ground, his fingers trembling. "I just said I was leaving, and you instigated my father to use his private army to kill people for you. Longqingting Shui, you're really something." I didn't." She looked at the old Lu Yi pleadingly. The old Lu Yi immediately blocked her. "This has nothing to do with Ting Shui. This was my idea." He glanced at the people below and said loudly, "It's not enough that these wicked servants persecuted Ting Shui. Now they want to play the blame game. Wuji, you must uphold justice for Ting Shui. Otherwise, her reputation will be ruined." The old Lu Yi was still trying to confuse the public and push the blame to others. "Wuji, there's really something wrong with these people. You didn't hear Buji slandering Ting Shui just now. He clearly has evil intentions." The old consort helped at the right time. Speaking of Buji, Longqing Wuji's heart ached. That was an official he trusted very much, but he was killed just like that. At this moment, Longqing Tingshui shed tears and begged, "Brother, it's all Tingshui's fault. Brother, please don't blame my father and mother. It's all my fault." At this moment, the old consort also begged, "Wuji, we did it for your sister's reputation." She lowered her voice and said, "Now, he's dead. If you don't let your sister off and make her lose her reputation, won't she lose everything?" Longqing Wuji's sharp eyes suddenly glared over, causing the old consort to be speechless. "It's because of your indulgence that she became so lawless." The old Lu Yi and the old consort didn't speak anymore. They knew in their hearts that since the person was dead, even if Longqing Wuji was angry at them, he wouldn't lose everything. This was really a double loss. As for what punishment he would give, they were his biological parents. What was there to be afraid of? Longqing Wuji felt like his entire head was exploding. Below, there was a group of commoners who wanted to know the truth. On the stage, there was also Gong Yimo and her people, as well as the few people who were still alive. Those people were looking at him expectantly, hoping that he would uphold justice. At this time, all he had to do was say that everything was his sister's fault and that everything Boogie said was true. Then, Tingshui's reputation in Dragon City would fall to the bottom, and no one would dare to marry such a vicious person. If he said that what Boogie said wasn't true, then those who were still alive would definitely be disappointed and lose the courage to continue living. And Gong Yimo, at this moment, he glanced at Gong Yimo. She was standing not far away, deep in thought. "Tingshui, apologize to Princess Gu." Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. "No matter what the truth is, you shouldn't implicate the innocent Princess Gu. She's Lu Ye's VIP guest." This sentence established Gong Yimo's weight. However, Tingshui felt that as long as she apologized, even if Longqing Wuji stood on her side in the end, the commoners wouldn't believe her. After all, if she apologized, it meant that she had wronged Gong Yimo. Since she wronged Gong Yimo, why couldn't she slander Boogie? So she couldn't apologize, Therefore, she pointed at the shattered stone chair on the stage and said with some fear, I don't dare to go near her. She has a sharp weapon on her. She'll smash me to pieces." Many commoners didn't know what she meant, but Longqing Wuji knew. Gong Yimo had a sharp weapon on her that could smash people to pieces. She even used a sharp weapon to hurt people just now. Gong Yimo took a few steps forward and smiled. "You see, I'm only wearing a few clothes, and I've already used my only self-defense weapon, but you don't look like you're sincere about apologizing." Longqing Wuji glanced at Gong Yimo and found that she didn't look like she could hide anything. He was slightly relieved because she would definitely carry something so important with her all the time. "Tingshui, why aren't you apologizing?" Longqing Tingshui was forced to apologize with gritted teeth. "I'm sorry," Gong Yimo was amused. She hated Longqing Tingshui to the extreme, so she definitely wouldn't let her off easily. "Sorry for what?" Longqing Tingshui raised her head and glared at her angrily. At this moment, she felt that her brother was still on her side and didn't intend to sacrifice himself for those 1,000 people. Therefore, her courage came back and she still hated Gong Yimo to the bone. "I shouldn't misunderstand you." Longqing Wuji's expression became slightly better. Gong Yimo shook her head in her heart. Longqing Wuji was a good person, but because he didn't have any relatives when he was young, he didn't care about these so-called relatives when he grew up. Especially this sister, he had always been the one to take care of her when she was young. He was strict with his words, but he didn't teach her a lesson. In the end, he was the one who suffered. However, she wouldn't let these people go. Therefore, she calmly approached and asked aggressively, "What did you misunderstand about me? Did you misunderstand that I had an affair with Boogie, or that I almost caused your death?" Gong Yimo sneered when she saw Longqing Tingxue backing away in fear. So you wanted to kill people, but you said it was to force me to show up. So you kept saying that I had an affair with Boogie. Let me tell you, this isn't a misunderstanding, this is framing. It's intentional framing. Princess Gu. Longqing Wuji frowned. He was already annoyed enough. He didn't know how to clear the name of the dead, and he had to appease the living. As for Longqing Tingxue, he would punish her severely, but he couldn't bear to destroy her. Therefore, he said unyieldingly, we'll talk about this when we get back to the palace. After all, it was a private matter. Even if he wanted to punish Longqing Tingxue, he couldn't do it in front of everyone. After all, embarrassing Longqing Tingxue would also bring shame to the royal family. Gong Yimo looked at him disapprovingly. She believed that Longqing Wuji would punish Longqing Tingxue severely, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to atone for her sins. Moreover, Longqing Wuji was biased. Just like now, between the few people left and Longqing Tingxue, he was so angry, but in the end, he still chose to protect Longqing Tingxue's reputation first. Of course, there was a reason to protect the royal family's reputation, but she was still angry. Although I'm very grateful that you chose to believe me without hesitation, I don't agree with the way you handled this matter. Gong Yimo's words made Longqing Wuji's face darken. Now that his thoughts were in a mess, couldn't they talk about it when they got back? Longqing Tingxue saw that they seemed to be in conflict, so she hurriedly said to Gong Yimo pitifully. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please don't blame royal brother. It's all my fault for misunderstanding you. I'm sorry. Gong Yimo frowned in disgust. All right, can you stop talking? Your apology makes me feel disgusted. I don't accept it. Longqing Wuji was anxious and anxious. His pair of blue and purple eyes, at this moment, had a kind of deep black color. Then what do you want to do? His voice was gloomy, and there was a danger of a storm coming. Chapter 344. Couldn't they just go back to the palace to resolve it? Why did they have to do it in front of everyone? Wasn't this forcing Lu Ye's royal family to lose face? Gong Yimo knew his concerns, but she was even more dissatisfied with his actions. Perhaps Longqing Wuji would severely punish Longqing Tingxue, but they all knew that no matter what the punishment was, as long as Longqing Tingxue stepped into Lu Ye's palace, she would be spared. She would be spared from the death penalty and her reputation would be preserved. She could even marry in a grand manner in the future and it wouldn't affect her. Then no matter how harsh the punishment was, it would be useless. At least, Gong Yimo felt that they couldn't let her off so easily. Even if this was Lu Yi, the people below the stage were all Lu Ye's citizens, and she was up against Lu Ye's royal family. I don't want to do anything. Gong Yimo said in a deep voice, but her finger pointed at Longqing Tingxue, but I feel that if she wants to apologize, she should at least kneel down. Princess Gu. Don't go too far. The old princess consort who could be considered pretty glared angrily. She felt that Gong Yimo really didn't know what was good for her. In Lu Yi, they were magnanimous and let her live. It was fine if she didn't know how to be grateful, but she actually wanted a yard after being given an inch. Not only her, even the old King Lu Yi was very angry. But the strange thing was that when the citizens below saw Gong Yimo bully their princess, they strangely didn't say anything. The angry old King Lu Yi didn't notice this, but Longqing Wuji did. The fact that the citizens didn't say anything proved that they also felt that Longqing Tingxue had gone overboard with Gong Yimo and she should apologize. So even if he was powerless, he still made a decision in an instant. Tingxue, kneel down. Longqing Tingxue thought that she was hearing things. Her brother actually wanted her to kneel down to a woman from Daiyu State, and this woman even harmed her like this. Longqing Wuji looked at her with fire in his eyes. Don't force this king to say it again. Even if he wanted to protect her reputation, he could only do his best to cover her up. But if she didn't cooperate, did she expect him to be biased to the point of silencing others? Seeing that Dongqing Wuji was really angry, Dongqing Tingshui was still afraid in her heart, but to kneel to Gong Yimo, she was really unwilling. She was more than willing to stab Gong Yimo in the back. She also didn't understand why Longqing Wuji changed his mind because of Gong Yimo's words. Could it be that Gong Yimo had seduced her brother so quickly? Seeing that Longqing Tingshui was unwilling, the old Lu Yi king pulled on Longqing Tingshui's arm and said angrily, "Why are you kneeling? You are a princess, and you did nothing wrong. Why should he kneel to someone from Daiyu State?" As he spoke, he gloomily looked at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo smiled and looked at Dongqing Wuji. She knew that Dongqing Wuji would definitely agree to her request, even if he was biased. Sure enough, when Longqing Tingshui was pulled away by the old Lu Yi king, she saw a faint light flash in her brother's eyes. Her heart thumped, and she quickly shook off her father's hand and cried, I'll kneel, I'll kneel." The faint light in Dongqing Wuji's eyes gradually faded. He couldn't help but look at Dongqing Tingshui. It was this insight and understanding of the situation that made him dote on her for so long. But today, he was really disappointed. "Kneel." He lifted his thin lips and said coldly. Dongqing Tingshui immediately knelt down with a heart full of hatred and killing intent. There was blood and corpses everywhere on the stage. She knelt among them and wanted to vomit. "Tingshui!" The old Lu Yi king and old Wang Fei shouted in unison, full of heartache. At this moment, the old Lu Yi king wanted to rush up and teach Gong Yimo a lesson, but he was firmly held back by old Wang Fei. Didn't she see that her son was angry? Seeing that no one could help her, Dongqing Tingshui looked at Gong Yimo and reflected in her heart. How could she lose? Gong Yimo clearly said that she wouldn't come, but she still came. Not only did she come, she even used a weapon to stop the fierce arrows. If only she didn't stop at that time, she would have been scared silly. But if she didn't stop at that time, they would all be shot to death. How could there be such an unbearable scene now? So, with deep regret and hatred, she kowtowed to Gong Yimo and gritted her teeth. "I'm sorry, Princess Gugwa." Gong Yimo crossed her arms and smiled. "Do you regret what you did?" Her voice was so mocking. Regret? Dongqing Tingshui stared straight at Gong Yimo. She regretted that she missed a good opportunity just now and didn't kill you directly. Gong Yimo seemed to be very satisfied and nodded. "Okay, but I didn't make it clear just now. I personally won't accept your apology because I find it dirty. I want you to kneel to the corpses on the ground and the few Lu Yi people over there who escaped death. You should apologize to them and kowtow 3 times. Gong Yimo." This time, it was Dongqing Wuji's voice that was filled with anger. She was actually so aggressive in front of Lu Yi. There were so many people present, but it was very quiet. Gong Yimo's voice was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears, echoing faintly between heaven and earth with a trace of coercion. Dongqing Tingshui looked at Dongqing Wuji with a panicked expression. It was still acceptable for her to kowtow to Gong Yimo because she had wronged her. However, if she kowtowed to the dead people, wouldn't she be admitting what Buji said and that she killed them to silence them? Then what reputation would she have left? Old Lu Ye's eyes were burning with anger. "Princess of Daiyu State, do you think Lu Yi is Daiyu State? Is it a place where you can behave atrociously? You don't have the right to interfere in Lu Ye's matters." He wasn't wrong. In fact, Gong Yimo didn't want to interfere in this matter. After all, it wasn't reasonable for her to interfere in how Lu Yi died. However, when she thought of Buji's death to show his sincerity, and his last sentence, Heaven is so unfair. It struck her deeply in her heart. She didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but she couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. Heaven is so unfair. This was also a thorn in her heart that had always been in her heart in her previous life. She clearly didn't do anything wrong, but she forcefully made a mistake. She clearly tried her best to quell the chaos, but in the end, her reputation was ruined. Heaven is so unfair. What about you? Do you think so too? Gong Yimou looked at Dongqing Wuji, and Dongqing Wuji looked back at her solemnly. He believed that Gong Yimou was not only seeking justice for herself, but also challenging his dignity as a king. And it was on Lu Ye's land, in front of Lu Ye's citizens. There was quite a commotion below the stage. The citizens were all in a mess, their hearts in a mess. They didn't know what kind of ending they were hoping for. However, many people's eyes swept across the corpse on the stage with pity in their eyes. What if this king doesn't agree? Dongqing Wuji's voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Furthermore, the pressure on his body increased as killing intent flashed in his eyes. Chapter 345. Long Cheng, Ting Shui and the rest were relieved. They even hoped that Gong Yimou would continue. She had angered Long Cheng Wuji. They wanted to see how Gong Yimou would leave Lu Yi alive. Everyone felt the pressure, as well as the tension in the air. At this moment, Gong Yimou closed her eyes and pointed to the blood-stained eagle statue. Do you know why Lu Ye's founding king had an eagle as his symbol? Long Cheng Wuji was stunned. He did not know why she suddenly said this. Gong Yimou continued. Do you know why the founding king Meng heir Tianhan did not proclaim himself emperor after establishing his country? As she spoke, her heavy gaze swept across the audience. Everyone became quiet again. Her gaze carried a trace of desire and inquiry. The eagle was the founding king's favorite animal. There were eagle statues everywhere in Lu Yi, but no one knew the reason. The eagle was used as a symbol because the eagle would not be biased. Every child it gave birth to would be thrown off a cliff by their mother not long after they were born. Those who could fly would live, those who could not fly would die. Lu Ye's environment was harsh. Survival of the fittest, so Meng heir Tianhan used the eagle as a symbol. He hoped that every citizen of Lu Yi would be as tenacious as a young eagle. Those who survived would be strong. He also hoped that the person who became the king of Lu Yi would be as fair as an eagle and would not be biased towards any of his children. Gong Yimou's words were like a thorn that pierced deeply into Long Cheng Wuji's heart. At this moment, his face was burning. He actually felt ashamed and unable to show his face. He thought that he was fair, but he could not refute Gong Yimou's blatant rebuke. Gong Yimou continued, the reason why Meng heir Tianhan did not proclaim himself emperor was not because he could not, but because he wanted to warn the world that most of Lu Ye's citizens were good. However, there was still class and injustice. So he had been waiting for an eagle-like overlord to solve this matter. He wanted to turn Lu Yi into a truly free and fair country. That would be the time to proclaim himself emperor. Gong Yimou pursed her lips and looked at Long Cheng Wuji. I always thought that you would be that person, but you have disappointed me. Look at them. Gong Yimou pointed at the corpses on the ground. Actually, to a person in power, as long as there was a valid reason, 1,000 people dying was not a big deal. However, the accumulation of blood was still very scary. Dark red. Many people's heads were covered with cloth. They did not even let out a scream when they died. Cheng Wuji, look at them. Gong Yimou pointed at the remaining 7 people. At this moment, they were firmly gathered together. Their eyes were full of reverence. Not everyone had Gong Yimou's courage. No matter what environment they were born in, it was hard to overturn their beliefs. They were afraid of death, but they were even more afraid of the king's anger. Long Ching Wuji could not help but look at them. They were all injured. They were not old and were in a sorry state. Only a pair of eyes were looking at him nervously and sincerely. They all believed that he would give them an explanation. Gong Yimo smiled. Look at your citizens below the stage. She sighed, indeed, I was meddling in other people's business today. I offended the Lu Yi royal family's face, and I apologize. However, I gave myself the face, so Long Ching Wuji should apologize even more. She can live, but since she dared to do it, she should dare to bear the consequences. It is a fact that she killed 1,000 innocent people to silence them. If you think that she did not deserve to die, she should at least kneel down and apologize. It's only 3 kowtows. These people have kowtowed countless times at her feet when they were alive. Everyone was silent. In the end, she asked softly. It's not too much, right? She asked Long Ching Wuji in a very, very soft voice. At this moment, Long Ching Wuji looked at her with a very complicated gaze, as if he did not know this girl. She, originally did not need to get involved in this mess, but she did. Even if she was in Lu Ye's territory, she was still aggressive and did whatever she wanted to do. Long Ching Wuji's gaze fell on Long Ching Wuji. It seemed that this sister of his had been destroyed by herself. Indeed, her plan was very good. However, it was a pity that she met Gong Yimo, who would not take a beating passively. She only had herself to blame. Ting Shui, kowtow. At this moment, his muddled mind finally cleared up. Although he was angry at Gong Yimo's aggressiveness, he was also glad. Preserving his life was the only thing he could do. However, was it really necessary to preserve this last fig leaf? No matter how simple his people were, they were not fools. Long Cheng's family was not without opponents. If this kind of weakness was left behind, it would become a knife for his enemies to kill him. Therefore, he could not be soft-hearted. This was actually the reason why Gong Yimo dared to do this. If she hid it, it would be a hidden danger. There was no need to cause chaos because of Long Ching Ting Shui. She believed that Long Ching Wuji, who had calmed down, would understand. As if sensing something, the two looked at each other. They both realized that they were thinking of the same thing. However, Long Ching Wuji's eyes still contained anger, while Gong Yimo was still very calm. Long Ching Ting Shui was stunned. She did not speak for a long time. She did not expect that because of Gong Yimo's words, her brother did not plan to protect her anymore. She could feel the angry eyes of the people below the stage. Because of Long Ching Wuji's words, they had completely believed what Buji said. As for her, a woman who killed people and wanted to play with people's hearts, she was afraid that from now on, she would no longer have any good reputation. No, she looked pleadingly at the old Lu Yi king, making a final struggle. The old Lu Yi king was angry and in a difficult position. He looked at Long Ching Wuji and said sorrowfully. Wuji, she is your sister. If you don't kowtow, this king will no longer have a sister. Long Ching Wuji's words directly cut off all her paths of retreat. If she was not a princess, her ending would be very, very miserable. Therefore, under Long Ching Wuji's cold gaze, she finally kowtowed for the first time. Her forehead was stained with the blood on the ground. In her heart, she had already torn Gong Yimo into pieces. What a good plan. As long as she did not destroy it, she could wash away all the dirt on her body and become Lu Ye's most popular princess again. Then, she could get married grandly. However, all of this was ruined by Gong Yimo. She was simply a jinx. When she kowtowed, the people below were in an uproar. Their expressions were angry, but because Long Ching Wuji was still there, they endured it. No wonder the little princess was so anxious to kill someone. Fortunately, this princess from Daiyu state had ruined it. Otherwise, they would not have known that the little princess was such a person. She was simply Lu Ye's disgrace. If it wasn't for the fact that Longqing Wuji was still here, those upright people would have shouted, Longqing Ting Shui, get out of Lu Yi. Under such humiliating gazes, Longqing Ting Shui kowtowed for the second time. All of this was Gong Yimo's fault. Chapter 346. And Longqing Wuji. He actually didn't help his own sister. In the end, she even hated the old King Lu Yi and the old Wang Fei. If they weren't useless, how could she be so passive? All of this was someone else's fault. When she was about to kowtow for the third time, the people actually dispersed. This made Longqing Ting Shui stunned. Gong Yimo laughed. Lu Ye's people also didn't accept her apology. This was really fun. Humiliation. When Longqing Ting Shui reacted, she realized that she was actually hated by the people of her own country. Her hands clenched into fists and made cracking sounds. She couldn't bring herself to kowtow for the third time. But if she didn't move, Longqing Wuji also didn't move. Since it had already reached this point, then she should finish kowtowing. After such a long silence, Longqing Ting Shui gritted her teeth and kowtowed for the third time. There was no one under the stage anymore. There was only humiliation, endless humiliation. At this time, there was a sudden commotion. The few people who were still alive, after seeing her kowtow, actually committed suicide. But their faces were filled with satisfaction, willing to die. The last person knelt in front of the somewhat panicked Longqing Wuji. His body was covered with trembling and bleeding wounds, but his eyes were clean and clear. He looked at Longqing Wuji and said, Lu Yi, as a king, will definitely be better. I want to tell this news to Lord Buji. With that, he knelt down and died. And in an instant, all of his resentment seemed to have been pacified. At this moment, an eagle's cry came from the sky. It was very likely that it was raised by one of the dead people. It circled in the sky for a long time before it left. It seemed that the moment it left, the cold yin qi on the field also disappeared. That was because Dragon City Everlasting's final justice had comforted the spirits of the dead warriors. Why did they commit suicide? Someone whispered. And Gong Yimo looked at Longqing Ting Shui, who was kneeling there without saying a word. Because Longqing Ting Shui was still alive. If they died now, it would be more straightforward. She shook her head and prepared to leave. At this time, old King Lu Ye's guards blocked Gong Yimo's path, and Gong Yimo's imperial guards immediately guarded her. The two sides were at loggerheads, and the old Wang Fei helped Longqing Ting Shui up with heartache. She glared angrily at Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Longqing Wuji was once again enraged. Can you stop causing trouble? He looked at his father. The old Lu Yi king gritted his teeth. It's this woman who ruined your sister's reputation. Wuji, are you afraid of the Daiyu state if you don't kill her? Gong Yimo was not afraid at all. She looked at the people in front of her and stood there calmly. She did not even move her eyebrows. Si Kong and the others were all tensed up. They would never allow these Lu Yi people to harm the princess in the slightest. Enough. Back down. Longqing Wuji ordered. The old Lu Yi king's people quickly backed down and made a path. The old Lu Yi king's face was red with anger. He stood in front of Gong Yimo. I will not allow this person to take a step into the palace. Unless she steps over my body. Longqing Wuji was also unyielding. He strode forward and grabbed Gong Yimo's hand. His deep eyes swept over them. Let's see who dares to stop me. This was equivalent to slapping his father's face. At that moment, the expression on his old face was quite interesting. Of course, no one would dare to stop launching Wuji. Thus, Gong Yimo was pulled into the royal carriage and headed towards the palace. Si Kong and the others saw the princess being pulled away by the old Lu Yi king. Their hearts were in turmoil. Your Highness, the princess has been taken away. After getting into the royal carriage, Longqing Wuji was still holding on to Gong Yimo's hand. Her brows jumped up. You're still not letting go. Longqing Wuji gave an angry laugh. I'm not letting go. You're very aggressive, just like a wild horse on the prairie, but you've angered me today. Gong Yimo gave a cold laugh. I haven't caused trouble for you yet. Your Longqing family really is talented, being able to think of such a sinister method. In my entire life, this is the first time I've met such a shameless person. Once she said this, Longqing Wuji's hand holding her wrist tightened. His eyes were filled with a deep rage. Gong Yimo, don't think that I don't dare to kill you. Gong Yimo was also very strong. I don't remember doing anything to offend you. You. His deep handsome face came closer. You're trying to challenge my dignity as a king. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes at the sky. If I wanted to attack your dignity, wouldn't it be better to just take out your name tag? Who dares to move against me? Her words made Longqing Wuji stunned, and strangely, his anger disappeared. That's right, Longqing Wuji's name tag represented Longqing Wuji. As long as she took it out from the start, no one would dare to touch her. But if such an important thing fell into the hands of others, others would only think that he was useless as a king. That would be a real loss of dignity. Thinking of this, Longqing Wuji glanced at Gong Yimo's sullen little face, and suddenly smiled slightly. Then why didn't you take it out? Rather than a difficult life and death situation, wasn't taking out the name tag the easiest way to solve the problem? At this moment, Gong Yimo's face stiffened. If I have to do it again, I'll take it out. When she said this, the two of them fell silent. Gong Yimo didn't expect Longqing Tingshui to directly give the order to shoot. In the chaos, it was useless for her to take out the name tag. If she took out the name tag the moment she appeared, those people wouldn't have died today. It was also unclear. Perhaps Longqing Tingshui would say that the name tag in her hand was fake, and still give the order to shoot. Longqing Wuji clearly thought of this point. He reached out his hand and touched Gong Yimo's head. But God knows, he originally wanted to use his fingers to smooth out the wrinkles between her eyebrows. This is my fault. When we reach the palace, I will personally go to the Eagle Deity Temple to ask for forgiveness. Gong Yimo slapped his hand away. What was the use of that? I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. After she said this, she really laid down on the bed in the carriage. She was dug out of bed early in the morning, and then so many things happened. It was really tiring. Seeing her angrily turn her back to him, Longqing Wuji couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, his carriage was a big bed, otherwise, there really wouldn't be a place for her to sleep. But he was a little worried, so he pushed Gong Yimo's back. Hey, you have to keep your words. You can't forget your promise yesterday just because of Ting Shui's matter. Gong Yimo said angrily with her back facing him. Why don't you marry Longqing Tingshui to that rotten old man? I'll take you and Lu Yi to become rich. Longqing Wuji didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You. He knew that Gong Yimo said this because she wouldn't ignore the country's affairs for private matters. That was enough. A woman like her who could distinguish the importance of things was really too rare. Longqing Wuji sighed in his heart. If Longqing Tingshui had half of Gong Yimo's breadth of mind, it wouldn't be like this. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.